It happened when I was 28, working in Phoenix. My parents flew in from Ohio to visit me in January, saying they wanted sun and quiet. I booked us a weekend at Desert Springs Resort because it was close to town and cheap off-season. The place felt half asleep. Low adobe bungalows, gravel paths, pale agave and rosemary along the edges. The pool lights buzzed to an empty deck, and a golf cart sat parked with no one around. The air got cold fast after sunset, and the wind pushed grit along the path. Our units were adjoining bungalows arranged in a semicircle around a central path. From the little plaza in the middle, you could see most doors at once. Each door had a small porch lamp and a metal number plate that rattled when the wind hit. Inside, there was a connecting door between ours. Just a simple latch and a second deadbolt. The clerk mentioned it when he handed over the key cards. We dropped our bags, checked the latches, and agreed we would meet at the restaurant after a short walk. We had spent the day hiking the national park, simple trails through flat desert with old signs and a long fence line. By late afternoon, the glare and dry air tripped my migraine switch. It started as a point behind my left eye, and then spread. At the restaurant, I tried to tough it out, but the overhead bulbs and the clink of plates set it off. I told them I needed to lie down. I did not make a big thing. I told my mom to order anything, and I would text when I woke up if I felt human again. I walked back alone. The gravel popped under my shoes. A housekeeper cart stood parked in a nook like someone forgot it and went home. My head throbbed, and that made sound feel sharp. Inside my bungalow, it was dark and cool, exactly what I wanted. 2 queen beds, square beige headboards, a dresser with a TV, a bathroom with a loud fan. I closed the door, set the deadbolt, and pulled the blackout curtains tight. The edges met in the middle with a thin seam of orange from the porch lamp. I took my medication in the bathroom, tablet with tap water. I pressed a cold washcloth over my eyes for a count of 20, then killed the light. I set an alarm, put my phone on the charger, and dropped my wallet and keycard on the dresser. I left the inside connecting door unlatched so they could check on me later. It was my parents, and it felt safe at a quiet resort. I lay down on the closest bed, pulled the blanket up to my neck, and passed out almost right away. My mother's voice pulled me from sleep. She was calling my name softly from across the room, not wanting to wake me if I was still out. I mumbled a response without moving much. The medication left me heavy, and for a few seconds, I did not know where I was. The only light came through that thin seam in the curtains. I saw my mom's outline near the other bed. She turned toward me with a confused look, like she had asked herself the wrong question and was trying to find the right one. Then we both saw it. A thin figure in a dark hoodie stood motionless beside my father's bed. The person had been leaning over him when we noticed. The hood hid the face. The sleeves were frayed at the cuffs. The shoes were dark and soft-soled. For a split second, I hoped it was a staff mistake, housekeeping in the wrong room. But this was not how staff stood. The angle of the shoulders and the stillness and the way they seemed to listen first and look second did not match staff. My mother gasped and stepped backward into the dresser. The lamp wobbled. The stranger reacted, fast and quiet, and dropped into a crouch in the corner by the closet, hands over their head like they were trying not to be hit. My father jolted awake at the noise and pushed himself up on his elbows. He looked right, then left, then toward the corner, still half somewhere else. I swung my legs over the side of my bed. The carpet felt rough under my feet, and cold air crept under the door. No one spoke for a few seconds. The only sounds were the bathroom fan tick and a drip in the sink. My dad squinted like he was trying to bring the corner into focus. The figure stayed crouched with fingers laced behind the head, elbows tight to the knees. I could see pale wrists in the gap where the sleeves rode up. I could not see a weapon. My mom's hand hovered over the wall switch but did not flip it, like light might break the thin balance we had in the room. The connecting door to their unit was cracked open. It made quick sense of why my mom was in my room and why my dad was on that second bed. They must have checked on me after dinner and sat for a minute. My dad must have closed his eyes and drifted. I kept my voice even and low. I said "Dad" very softly. He turned his head my way. I pointed at the front door. "We are going to leave." The person in the corner did not move or speak. Hands stayed on the head like they were waiting for something to be over. Cold air pushed in hard when the lock turned. My dad took my elbow and moved first, keeping his eyes fixed on the corner. The hooded person stayed crouched, hands on their head, still. We did not argue or ask why. We all scrambled for the door. Outside, we moved fast along the gravel path toward the main office. The cold air felt thin, and the lamps along the path threw small cones on the ground. My father already had his phone to his ear, reading the room number to the dispatcher, saying we were safe and moving towards staff. I kept checking behind us without meaning to. No one was there. The pool sat black and flat. A soda machine rattled somewhere. The office door was locked, but the night window was lit. The manager sat inside on a stool, watching a muted TV. He looked bored until he saw my mother's face. My dad held up the phone and said police were on the way. The manager grabbed a ring of keys from a hook, took a flashlight, and stepped out. He did not waste time with questions. He knew our units from check-in and started power walking back with us, saying he would open both doors, asking if we saw a weapon. We said no weapon. He nodded once and kept going. Back at the bungalow, the porch lamp threw that same orange seam around the curtains. The outer latch still sat closed from when we left. We opened the door and stood back. The room looked like we left it. The blanket on my bed was half off. The bathroom door was open. No one in the corner. The connecting door to the next bungalow was wide open. That door made a small click against the wall in the draft. We heard voices from the next room. A man speaking fast in Spanish, a woman trying to calm someone, and a choked sound like a cry from a teenager. The manager raised a hand to us to wait and knocked hard on the edge of the open connecting door. He called out. The voices stopped. Then the other door opened more. A family stepped into view. A father in a worn baseball cap and a tired face, a mother with her sweater zipped to her chin, and a teenage boy in a dark hoodie who looked like he wanted to sink into the carpet. The hoodie was the same. Same frayed cuffs. Same soft shoes. The boy couldn't look at us at first. He kept glancing toward the floor, then to his parents. The father said his last name, and the manager repeated it and checked the clipboard he brought. They had checked in that afternoon. The mother put her hand on the boy's shoulder and said his first name, Rodriguez, in a soft voice. He nodded once and looked up. His eyes were red. He said he went to the bathroom and came out into the wrong room because the door was open. My dad stayed on the phone while this happened. He told the dispatcher there was another family in the connecting unit, and it looked like a mistake. The dispatcher said officers were still coming and to wait outside. The manager kept us all in the doorframe area so no one felt cornered. He asked if anyone was hurt. We said no. The other mother said no. We moved into the open air to wait for the police. The temperature had dropped another few degrees. I could smell creosote and pool chlorine. The golf cart sat where it had been before. The kid stood between his parents, hands in the kangaroo pocket, shoulders pulled in. He kept saying he was sorry. He said it to me, then to my mom, then to my dad's voice on the phone. He looked like he had not expected to speak English, but did fine. He explained it in pieces. He had fallen asleep in clothes on top of the bed. He woke up thirsty and disoriented. Their layout matched ours, but mirrored. He slipped into the bathroom, heard nothing, and came out through the wrong door. The interior doors had a basic latch. It was flipped open on both sides. The light in their place was off. The light in ours was off. He saw my father's shape and thought it was his younger brother who sometimes had nightmares. He leaned down because his brother hates being shaken awake. That was the second we looked over and saw him. My mother said, "I thought you were him," and pointed at me. She kept her voice steady. She said it was a misunderstanding. She said when I lived at home and a migraine hit, sometimes I would get up at night and stand in the hall like I forgot where I was going. She said she saw a tall figure in a hoodie and thought it was me hovering. She said that is why she walked over without turning on the light. The boy said when he realized none of the shapes or furniture lined up with his room, he panicked. He dropped down and put his hands on his head because he did not want anyone to think he was grabbing something. He said his uncle told him once to show your hands and get small if scared in a situation you caused. He stayed in the corner until we ran. His parents were mortified. The father said they would pay for our rooms. He took out his wallet and tried to give a card to the manager right there. The manager said, "Hold on." The mother apologized over and over. My mom said it was all right but kept rubbing her hands together like she could not get warm. The manager stayed calm and held his light down at the ground. 2 patrol cars rolled in a few minutes later, quiet except for gravel under tires. The officers stepped out and kept their hands visible and their questions basic. They separated us slightly to hear both sides. They checked the interior door latches, looked at the alignment, saw how alike the 2 rooms were. The manager used the master key on our outer door, then theirs, and demonstrated how easy it was to confuse the doors in the dark. One officer tested the chain and latch. He tapped the striker plate and it wobbled. They asked for IDs. We all handed them over. They ran the names and everything came back clean. The boy's hands shook as he gave his wallet to the officer. The officer told him to sit for a second and breathe. He asked if anyone needed medical attention. No one did. He took a few photos of the connecting doors in the hallway, wrote numbers on a notepad, and then told us it looked like a misunderstanding. He said, "Lock both sides when you sleep, all right?" He looked at the manager next. "Fix this." The manager said yes. My mother dug in her tote and pulled out a thermos. She poured hot chocolate into the little metal cup and handed it to the boy. Steam rose in the cold. The boy took it with both hands and drank. His shoulders lowered a notch. His mother thanked my mom quietly. The officer stayed a few minutes more, and then cleared the call, reminding us to ring 911 if anything else happened. The flashing lights faded down the access road and left the resort quiet again. We sat out in the central area under a clear sky. The stars were sharp. The desert made every sound carry, so we spoke in low voices. The kid apologized again and again. At some point, we all laughed a little in that way people do when adrenaline drops. My dad shook the boy's hand and said it was okay. My mother said to keep the rest of the hot chocolate. The boy kept the empty thermos cup and handed it back clean. Rodriguez's mother explained they had asked for connecting rooms because their group was big. They thought all the doors connected only within their set. They did not realize one door could open to a stranger's room if both sides were unlatched. The manager listened and said he understood. He kept saying he was sorry. He said he would comp both our stays for the trouble and get maintenance to check every door before morning. We went back inside with the manager. He watched while we slid the interior latch and set the deadbolt. He tried the handle from both sides. It held. He made a note on his clipboard and said he would leave a sign in the rooms about checking the latches. He gave us a second chain for the interior door that he took off another unit for the night. He called it a temporary fix. We slept with the curtains cracked a little so the porch light drew a line on the carpet. The heater clicked on and off. At sunrise, the place looked normal again. We ate breakfast in the small dining area. The boy passed with his mother on the way out, and he nodded at us without stopping. He looked less pale. His father talked to the manager near the coffee urn for a while, and then they left for the park. We spent the rest of the weekend low-key. We took short walks on the resort grounds, kept the daylight simple, and double-checked every lock each time we left or entered. We joked in small bursts about the hoodie ghost, then stopped calling it that because it was a real kid who made a mistake. We told the story without extra drama. It was fast. It was scary for a minute, and then it was fine. The manager later said the connecting door setup had a design flaw. The strike plates and latch positions made it easy to leave one side unlatched without noticing. He said they would fix it after our incident. I believed him. The place felt like it ran on old habits and needed a push to modernize. And this was the push. Before we checked out, he printed a zeroed bill and wrote "comped" across it with his initials. Sometimes the scariest moments come from simple human error. That thin line between comedy and tragedy depends entirely on everyone's reaction in those first crucial seconds. I was 8 months into owning my first house in suburban Denver when it started. The place was a small ranch on a quiet street, beige siding and a shallow porch. I painted the front door red myself, and it still stuck on humid nights. My routines were simple. Late dinner, dishes, check each window latch, set the deadbolt, lights out. Around midnight that first night, the doorbell rang like someone leaned on it. I walked to the entry barefoot, looked through the peephole, and saw an empty porch and dark street. I listened, waited, and opened the door. Nobody. 10 minutes later it rang again, longer, the chime vibrating through the kitchen tile. I moved faster this time but kept the deadbolt set. Through the peephole there was nothing but the porch light frame and a slice of yard. I toggled the switch twice and waited in the hallway for footsteps. Nothing. It hit a third time that night, a jab that made the button stick. I stood to the side of the door and stayed quiet until it stopped. When I opened up, the porch was empty, faint cigarette smell hanging, 2 little gravel stones on my mat. The second night I was already awake when the doorbell came. They didn't just ring. They pounded, flat palms on wood, rhythmic thuds that shook the chain. I stayed to the hinge side of the frame, eye at the peephole, phone in hand. No one stood on the porch. The pounding paused, started again, then stopped. I said through the door that I was calling the police, then walked to the kitchen and dialed. By the time I stepped back, the street was quiet. I opened the door and scanned both ways. Nothing moved except a sprinkler down the block. On the third night, I left the lights off and waited. I set a chair in the hallway where I could watch the door without standing in front of the glass. My phone sat charging on the floor. At midnight, the bell went off, then 3 quick taps like someone toying with it. I moved to the peephole and held my breath. I caught them as they ran, 3 adult men, not kids, low and fast off my porch. They looked rough, dirty jackets, worn caps. They cut left toward the cross street and were gone before the chime stopped. I called the non-emergency line again and told the dispatcher this was the third night. A calm male voice asked if I had video or license plates. I said no, just a glimpse through a peephole. He said without evidence of a crime they couldn't do much. He suggested an online report, brighter lighting, and cameras. He gave me a case number. I repeated it back and wrote it on an envelope by the stove. I wedged a broom in the back slider track, checked each window, and set a chair under the front knob. I slept 2 hours maybe. Before I could set up any security, They escalated on the fourth night. It started with one long ring, then hammering on the door and the front windows. The panes rattled. I stood behind the door and watched the peephole for motion. A sharp crack followed like a gunshot in my entry. Grit hit my face. A rock punched through the decorative glass at the top of my front door and rained shards across the mat. I stepped wide, turned the deadbolt, and pulled the door open while the glass still skittered. The streetlights hummed. Someone was already running. I saw them clearly under the lights as they jogged away. 3 men in their 30s, not kids, laughing like it was a prank. One turned and slapped his friend's shoulder. Another looked back, grinned, and kept moving. The rock lay in a fan of glass by my foot. Rage pushed me past the smarter choice. I grabbed my shoes from the mat, shoved my feet in without socks, and went after them. I didn't lock the door. I kept to the curb and stayed 30 yards back, my phone clenched in my fist, screen dark to keep me hidden. They weren't hiding where they were headed. They ran straight past the model home with fake stone, past the yard with the blue dumpster, and across the cross street without looking. Their pace was steady, like they'd done this before. I matched from a distance, cutting through darker edges and skipping the brightest pools of light. My heels slid inside loose shoes each step. Glass grit rubbed under my heel. A dog barked once behind a fence and went quiet. Somewhere a garage door coughed shut. They moved relaxed, laughing a little, and I followed, counting houses as we went. At the second intersection they cut right, then left, then went straight for 4 blocks toward a street where the houses sagged and the yards gave up on grass. The sidewalks were cracked with weeds through them, and the lamps buzzed more than they lit. They slowed at a run-down house with a buckled porch and a sunken couch in the dirt. The blinds were bent and dusty. 2 trash cans lay on their sides by the curb. A porch light hung by one screw, dull yellow. They climbed the steps, laughing, and shouldered a swollen green door that squealed. I stopped on the sidewalk and wiped glass dust from my cheek. I looked at the house number stenciled on the curb, then checked the numbers over the door in case the paint had flaked. I made myself say the address under my breath, then again, and again, until it stuck. The porch light hummed. A car passed at the far corner without slowing. I didn't step closer. I didn't call out. I didn't dial. I stood with my hands at my sides right there and kept my eyes on those numbers. I stood on the sidewalk, memorizing the address. I marched up to their door and knocked hard, knuckles on swollen wood. I said they owed me for the window. The porch light buzzed and threw a weak circle. No answer. Inside, floorboards creaked and a door closed deeper in the house. I knocked again, louder, and said I had already called the cops. Air moved in the side yard. A small rock whistled past my left ear and bounced off the stucco behind me. I turned toward the side yard and saw a shadow duck. A second rock came from the curb, low and fast, and cracked against the porch post. Glass clinked under my shoe from the earlier break in my door. I stepped off the porch to get a clearer angle. A bottle sailed from behind a parked sedan and smashed in the street, liquid splashing my legs. Another bottle followed and hit the steps, then burst. I backed away as gravel skittered across the sidewalk at my feet. They were surrounding me now, spread between the side yard, the dented car, and the dark hedge by the porch. I saw a sleeve, a cap brim, and a shape lean out. A stone glanced off my hip. I put my forearm over my head and moved fast down the sidewalk, half running, shoulders hunched. A heavy bottle came out of the hedge and hit my right shoulder solid enough to drop me to a knee. I pushed up and kept running, hugging the darker side of the street and cutting corners to shorten the distance home. More projectiles hit the pavement around me, breaking with sharp pops and dull thuds. I kept my head down and didn't look back. A car turned onto the cross street and slowed, then sped up again. I reached my block and the red door with the hole in it came into view, the porch light still on. I went straight inside, slammed the door, turned the deadbolt, and shoved the chair under the knob. I picked up my phone from the hall floor and called 911. My voice came out steady when I gave the exact address and the route they took. I said they were attacking me with rocks and bottles and had already broken my door window. The dispatcher's tone changed. He told me to stay inside and not engage, and said cars were on the way. I moved through my place with the phone on speaker, turned off the front light to make myself less of a target, and stuck a towel under the broken pane to block the view. I grabbed a cold pack from the freezer and pressed it to my shoulder. Siren noise came fast, close, then multiple sets, up and down the streets. I stepped onto my porch and watched under the eave. 4 patrol cars rolled in from 2 directions with steady whoops and then cut their sirens as they stopped. Doors opened. Officers spread out with flashlights and voices that were short and clipped. 2 went down the sides of the house. 1 stood in the street and watched the corners. Another pair went straight up to the green door and knocked hard, then announced themselves. Movement flashed in the backyard. A man tried to bolt over the fence and slipped. He landed awkward and pushed to run again, but an officer met him at the corner and drove him down clean. Cuffs clicked. Another door inside the house banged. The officers stacked and moved in. Their flashlights cut through the broken blinds and swept the rooms. I heard someone shout for hands and then the thump of something heavy on wood. I stayed on my porch rail, arms folded, not stepping off my property. 10 minutes later, they walked a second man out, hands behind his back, head down, a smear of dirt on his cheek. A third came after with his eyes wild and a cut on his forehead. He barked something at the officers and got quiet quick when they turned him into the car. An older woman in a stained hoodie stood in the doorway and argued until a sergeant told her to sit on the steps. She did. They were there for 2 hours. More units came and left. A van with covered windows backed into the driveway. I watched officers carry out boxes, clear plastic tubs, and a metal frame that looked like a vent hood. They rolled out a tank on a dolly and a sealed cooler. Photos were taken. The backyard lit up under a pole light they brought. A uniformed officer took my identification and asked me to wait. A detective would talk to me. The detective who came over wore a windbreaker and had that tired Friday look. He asked me to tell the story clean from the first doorbell. I did, step by step, no extra. He nodded, typed into his phone, and then showed me 3 photos on the screen one by one. They were quick pictures, faces and jackets snapped in the entry while the men were cuffed. I recognized all 3 who had hit my door and thrown projectiles at me. He said they had found a lot more than expected inside. He kept it simple. He said equipment in the basement, chemicals, scales, baggies, a ledger. He said 5 adults lived there, 2 men and 3 others, and all of them had records. He said the violent part made sense now. He said they either thought I was someone else, or they were testing how I would react in case they wanted to push people off the block. I gave my statement, signed his screen with my finger, and he gave me a card and a case number. Before he left, he walked with me to my door and looked at the broken glass. He told me to tape plastic over it for the night and not to sleep near the front. He said they would have cars swing by a few times until morning. It was after 3 a.m. when the last patrol unit rolled slow past my place and turned the corner. I swept the glass into a dustpan, put cardboard over the hole, and moved a chair to face the entry. I slept there with the light on. The next afternoon, the detective called and explained it wasn't random. He said these were intimidation tactics. He said they had been watching the neighborhood and keeping track of who left for work early and who left cars unlocked. He said my house sat empty for 6 months before I bought it. Long driveway, easy turnaround, no one to complain. They might have used it and got angry when someone new settled in and started turning on lights at night. He said all 5 were arrested on drug charges, and 3 faced additional charges for assault and vandalism from the attack and the damage to my door. 2 months later, I testified at the preliminary hearing. I walked through the timeline again and pointed out the men I saw on my porch, and the one who ran, and the one who laughed and looked back. The defense asked basic questions about distance and light. I answered simple. The judge bound the case over. I left the courthouse, rode the elevator with a court clerk and a delivery guy, and stepped into bright afternoon sun that felt normal. The city condemned the house that same winter. I drove by a few times because I wanted to see it gone. The windows were boarded and spray painted with big orange X's. A month later, a crew pulled the siding, and then the roof. By spring, it was a leveled lot with a roll-off full of rotted wood. You could see the outline of the basement in the dirt before they filled it. A year later, a clean new 2-story sat there with a narrow porch and a small blue flag that said, "Sold." I installed security cameras the next day after the raid, one over the porch covering the street and one watching the driveway. I put motion lights on the garage and trimmed the shrubs to knee height. The door got a new solid panel with no glass and a reinforced strike plate. I kept the habit of checking locks every night and kept the broom still in the slider track. I never had another problem. Sometimes standing up to bullies reveals they're into something much worse than harassment. I was a junior at Portland State, taking an intro economics lecture in a sloped hall with buzzing fluorescent lights and tiny flip-up desks. About 150 students spread out in islands. I sat mid-right because the projector was not as washed out on that side. Around week 3, a guy named Jason started sitting 2 rows behind me and 1 seat over. He never spoke. He came in late, avoided eye contact, filled pages with neat block letters, and left fast as soon as the professor dismissed class. I noticed small things first. He did not look at the slides. He stared straight ahead until someone glanced back, then ducked to his notebook. He carried a gray backpack with no patches or stickers. No laptop, just a blue pen and loose leaf under a binder clip. When class ended, he moved quickly, pen clipped, notebook closed, eyes down, exiting before the aisle clogged. On the way out, he drifted to the side doors like he had mapped the room. At first, I wrote it off. Big school, weird people. But the next week I saw him in the library when I went to study after my campus job. He was already there at a 4-top near the windows. Same backpack, notebook open, nothing checked out. He did not read. He watched the aisles. I took a Carol 2 rows back and kept my head down. Later that day, I saw him again in the cafeteria, alone with an untouched coffee, facing the main doors. It felt like coincidence, so I told myself to ignore it. When I left for work around dusk, I spotted him in the parking garage on level 3, standing near a faded exit arrow. He was not on his phone, not talking to anyone, just posted like he was waiting for something to happen. I drove past slow, trying not to stare. After the 3rd or 4th day like that, it felt like a pattern. He was always there first. Library before I got there. Cafeteria before lunch. Garage before my shift. I started watching distances, sight lines, and clocks. I tried to be rational. Schedules overlap. The campus is not huge. I mentioned it to my roommate while we folded laundry on our beds. She rolled her eyes. "You are being paranoid," she said. "College is small. You will run into people." I said okay, but I started writing down times anyway. Tuesday, 1:10 p.m. Jason sits as I unzip my backpack. Wednesday, 3:45 p.m. Quiet floor, end of the long table, eyes on the aisle. Thursday, 12:22 p.m. Cafeteria, left soda fountain, coffee untouched. None of it was illegal. Still, it changed how I moved. In lecture, I showed up right at the start so I could slip into a different section each day. He adjusted without seeming to try. He always ended up with a line of sight. He never said a word to me. He never brushed by me. He never even looked directly at me up close. That made it worse. It left everything open to guesswork. I kept my backpack on my lap, water bottle by my shoes, phone on silent in my pocket. One evening in late October, after a long shift at the bookstore, I drove off campus down Broadway toward my dorm. The air was damp, streetlights glaring on wet pavement. As I merged by the theater, a silver sedan slipped into my lane and settled behind me, 2 car lengths back. That was not unusual. What stuck in my head was how it matched me through a yellow light I barely made. I turned right on a street I never used. The sedan turned too, smooth, like it had always planned that turn. I told myself to test it. I took 3 random turns, no signals until the last second, just enough to be safe. He stayed with me every time. I drove past my dorm without slowing and looped around the block. My heart thudded, palms slick on the steering wheel. The sedan still followed. I circled back again, then cut over toward a gas station on the corner with bright white LEDs and a clear view of the attendant. I pulled up by the door, nose almost touching the yellow curb, and waited. The sedan rolled past without stopping. I watched its taillights shrink and disappear behind a bus. I sat there pretending to scroll my phone while keeping my eyes on the glass. The clerk looked bored. 2 guys bought tall cans and left. I kept expecting the silver car to glide back in. It did not. When my pulse slowed, I filled half a tank I did not need, used the bathroom, and drove back to campus on busy streets. I parked under a camera and went inside fast with my keys between my fingers. The next day after lecture, I asked around. I started with the girl near the front with color-coded tabs. She shook her head. "Who is Jason?" she asked. I tried a guy who always answered questions. He did not know either. I checked the group chat for problem sets. His name was not there. Nobody had him in office hours. 2 people ran an econ study group in the library. They had never seen him. It was like he only existed in the rows and then vanished. One girl from the back said she had seen him near the computer lab on the 2nd floor a few days before. She said he tried to go in without a student ID and got stopped at the turnstile by the desk worker. He said he left it at home, she told me. They said no ID, no entry. That fit what I had seen. No laptop, no campus stickers, no name on anything. The professor never called on him. In a crowd that size, it was easy to be invisible if you wanted. Over the next few nights, I watched for the silver sedan. I varied my routes. If a car stayed behind me past 2 turns, I pulled into lit places and waited, pretending to check directions. No one stopped. A couple of times I thought I saw that same dull chrome grille, but it was just another commuter. I set rules for myself. Don't park in the same spot twice. Don't stay late alone if you can help it. Don't walk with headphones. The campus safety page lived open on my phone. Then the next week he stopped coming to lectures. His usual seat stayed empty 5 straight classes. I felt relieved and stupid for overreacting. 2 weeks after he stopped showing up, I closed the bookstore at 9 and drove across campus toward my dorm. The sidewalks were mostly empty. A few bikes went by. The air was cold, and the windshield fogged at the edges when I breathed. As I turned onto the one-way in front of my building, my headlights lit the entry steps and the glass door. He was there. Same gray backpack, hands in his jacket pockets, feet square to the door like he had been counting people. He was not smoking, not talking, not pretending to be on a call. He was just standing, watching the door. I did not slow down. I stayed in the right lane and rolled past the curb cut like I had missed it. I went down the block and around, keeping to the main street where the lights were stronger. I checked my mirrors. He did not move. I circled back 20 minutes later after sitting in a grocery store lot with the engine off. He was still there in the same spot under the yellow vestibule light, head turning whenever someone swiped their card. A couple residents went in. He tried to follow tight behind one of them, but the second door needed a card too, and the person blocked him with a backpack and went through fast. He stepped back and looked at his phone like he was waiting for a text to say, "I'm here." I parked 2 blocks away on a side street under a bare tree. I kept the doors locked and called my roommate. I told her not to open the door. She went to the window and looked down at the entrance. She described his jacket and the way he kept shifting his weight. Same guy. She said she would call campus security. I stayed in the car. I killed the headlights and slid lower in the seat but kept my eyes on the corner of the building. My phone battery was at 30%. I watched the minute numbers move. He tried the door again. He tugged it twice like maybe the reader would glitch if he pulled fast. He stepped back. He paced to the corner by the vending machines and came back. He kept checking his phone. No one approached him. He did not leave. I could see his face now when passing cars threw light across the steps. Blank expression, jaw tight. He looked both ways every time a group walked up, like he was picking the right moment to slip in. He missed 2 more opportunities because the lobby was busy. He waited. Campus security pulled up in a white SUV within 10 minutes. They parked a little crooked across the fire lane with the light bar off. 2 officers got out. Both wore black jackets with security in white letters, duty belts with radios, cuffs, and flashlights. They did not run. They walked with that deliberate pace that says this is routine, but not casual. As they came up the steps, I saw his posture change. His shoulders rose. He pivoted like he might bolt to the side. They spoke to him. I could not hear the words from my car, but I saw his hands come out of his pockets, palms up, then his arms moving wide as if he was drawing a map in the air. He shook his head, took 1 step toward the sidewalk, and 1 officer slid left to block him. The other kept talking, calm, 1 hand near his radio. He tried to walk past them anyway. The taller officer put a hand on his upper arm and stopped him. He jerked back hard and said something short that made both officers tense. They held him there. Not a full grab, but enough. The second officer asked for ID. He pulled a card from his wallet and handed it over. They looked at it under the porch light. One of them keyed numbers into a phone, then tried the radio. It took a while. They went back and forth, listening, repeating a name. The minutes stretched. Students came and went, staring a little, then hurrying inside. He started talking faster. He tried to take a step again. The taller officer shifted his grip, firm now. The radio chatter picked up. A second security SUV arrived, then a third. 1 officer took the ID inside to the desk. He came back, shook his head, and spoke low. The first 2 looked at each other. They moved him to the side wall out of the way of the door. Red and blue reflected on the glass after that, washing over the posters and the mailboxes. A city police cruiser pulled up behind the security vehicles. 2 officers stepped out, hands on their vests, not rushing. They listened to the security supervisor, then approached him. He talked again, fast, different tone, like he was trying to sound reasonable. They turned him around, cuffed his hands behind his back, and walked him to the patrol car. The security supervisor, a stocky guy with a gray beard and a clipboard, looked out across the parking and scanned faces. My roommate must have told them where I was. He walked over to my car and tapped the window. I unlocked it. He asked my name and checked it on the clipboard. He told me what they had. The ID he gave security did not show up in the student system. he was not enrolled. They recognized him from camera reviews they had been doing in relation to other reports. He had been slipping into large lectures where nobody scanned IDs. He had used a different name to people who asked. They had been looking for him around the library and the labs since that incident at the turnstile. Tonight they found him at my building because the desk had called about a guy who kept hovering near the door on previous nights. He told me the officers would take him downtown for trespassing and to verify identity because the name on his card did not match anything valid in their system. He said they would file a trespass notice for campus property and talk to me more inside with a female officer present. He kept it factual. He told me to stay in the car until the patrol car left. After they drove him away, I went inside with the supervisor. We sat at a table in the lobby with the camera dome right above us. He gave me a printed incident number and a card. He told me the man was 24, not a student anywhere. They knew his real name from previous contact at another school. He had a record that matched a pattern. He would pick someone from a crowded class and track their routine. He was already banned from 2 other campuses in Oregon for the same behavior. When they searched him at the car, they found a small notebook in his jacket pocket. In that notebook were pages that lined up with my last month. My econ lecture times were written with room numbers and the professor's name. He had my bookstore hours down to the shift, including the nights I closed. He had my car make, color, and license plate written twice. There were scripts, like practice text messages, written in block letters. He had my name written with different forms of address, then lines like, "You looked cold today, want coffee?" and entire back and forths where I supposedly said yes. The supervisor did not read all of it out loud. He pushed the notebook back into an evidence bag and sealed it. They had also pulled camera stills before tonight that showed him trying doors around my building late, 2 and 3 nights in a row, hands on handles like he was checking for one stuck on the latch. He watched for people who propped the door with a shoe or a pizza box. He had not made it inside because the front door needed the second swipe and the side entrances were locked. He had figured out my floor from the mailbox labels and the time I entered after a shift. The officers took statements. They asked for my last 2 weeks of routes from work and class, which way I usually drove, the time of that gas station stop when the silver sedan peeled off, and the times I had seen him in the library. They asked for screenshots of the group chat where I asked about him. I gave them everything. They told me to vary my schedule even more for now and to call if I saw anyone matching him near my building again. A month later, the case went to court on criminal trespass and stalking charges. He pled guilty to both. The judge issued a restraining order. He got 18 months. The county notified the university and the state board that oversees campus safety. The supervisor met me again and walked me through extra options: night escorts, temporary parking permit for a garage closer to the bookstore, and a flag on my dorm record so the desk would double-check visitors. I switched to online classes for the rest of the semester. The university changed procedures after that. Large lecture halls started checking IDs at the door before the start of class. The econ building added a stand with a scanner and a rope line, and assistants checked names against the roster. The library tightened the turnstiles and posted someone during peak hours. My building set the door to alarm if it stayed open longer than 30 seconds. I kept the restraining order in my glove box and saved the incident number in my phone. It is terrifying how someone can study your life without you knowing their real name. I was working as a graphic designer when this happened 2 years ago. Back then, my life was simple. Long edits, cheap takeout, streaming shows with David. Our place was a small 1-bedroom on the 3rd floor over a laundromat. The door was old varnished wood with a basic pin tumbler lock and a brass peephole. The hallway had gray carpet and a humming exit light. We kept our shoes on a rack by the mat, keys in a bowl, nothing fancy. It felt safe enough for a big city rental. The first time I heard the metal scratching, I thought I was still asleep. A thin, sharp scraping carried through the door like a tiny saw. It was neat and steady, not random. I sat up and listened. The sound had rhythm. Tap, scrape, pause, scrape. It was close, right at the lock. Someone was working on our apartment door with tools. It lasted maybe 30 seconds. I nudged David awake. He mumbled something about maintenance and rolled back over. The sound stopped. All I heard after that was the elevator. I got up anyway. I walked to the door and pressed my palm to the wood. It vibrated a little like a living thing. I looked through the peephole, but the fisheye view showed only the opposite wall and a bend of empty hallway. I didn't open up. I just stood there until the air went still again, then set the chain and went back to bed. I tried to tell myself it was nothing. The words didn't help. I stared at the dark until my alarm went off for work. The next night, about the same time, the sound came back. It wasn't faint now. It was methodical. I woke David, and we both went to the door in our socks. We held our breath and listened. We could hear different tools testing the pins, a little click when one set, then a slow draw, and another try. The handle shifted once, like a gentle test of travel. David looked at me, then he yanked the door open fast. The hallway was empty. Somewhere below us, we heard footsteps hit the stairwell and run down hard. We stood in the doorway, scanning for movement. Nothing. No voices. Just a draft and a distant dog barking outside. David locked the door again and checked the plate. I touched the area around the keyway. The brass felt polished and warm. We didn't say much. We sat for a while with the lights off, listening to a building that was suddenly too loud. The refrigerator motor felt like a warning. Every pipe tick made me tense. We slept late and woke up tired. David decided we needed eyes on the hallway. He ordered a hidden camera that replaced our peephole lens and recorded on motion detection. It arrived the next afternoon. He unscrewed the old peephole, slid the tiny camera through, and tightened it with a coin. On the inside, the lens looked like the old brass piece. On the outside, it was the same too. The video fed straight into an app on his phone. We tested it with the door closed until the picture looked clean. The fisheye covered the whole bend. For 2 nights, nothing happened. We kept the bedroom door cracked. We talked less. We didn't run the dishwasher after 10. The camera sent a few false alerts when someone carried laundry down the hall, but that was it. On the 3rd night, the phone chimed on David's nightstand around the time the elevator usually went quiet. He rolled over, grabbed it, and showed me the screen. The live view of our door was flat and gray under the hall lights. A thin figure in a black hoodie stepped into frame and crouched at our lock. You couldn't see his face. He kept his head angled down and away from the peephole like he knew exactly where it was. He looked maybe 19 or 20. Thin, no beard, small hands under thin gloves. He moved in fast, set a tension wrench into the lock, and began to work with short, precise motions. He kept checking the hall, little flicks left and right, never more than a second. The toolkit in his hand was not cheap. I recognized the neat case, the clean finish. This wasn't a random drunk. The counter on the app marked the time. 1 minute, 2, 5. He paused to change picks, then started again, and the wrench barely moved like he had a steady, trained hand. When the elevator hummed, he froze against the wall, then returned to the lock like nothing had happened. I watched the angle of his shoulders. He wasn't excited. He was focused. Later, we checked the saved file. From first frame to last, he spent 12 minutes on our lock, kneeling there like it was just another task on a list. We didn't run into the hall. There was no point. David hit save, then he trimmed the clip to the parts that showed the tools clearly and exported it. In the morning, he took the USB and his phone to the police station around the corner. A desk officer brought him into a small room and watched the video twice. The officer said the guy had professional tools, moved like he did this often, and that they'd increase patrols in our area. They gave David a card and a case number and told him to call if we heard anything again. We didn't wait on the patrols. That night, we added a deadbolt above the main lock and a heavy chain on a separate plate. David drilled the holes and vacuumed the sawdust out of the jamb. We tested the chain. The door opened 3 inches and hit hard. The deadbolt threw a long steel tongue and seated with a clean thunk. We ran the lock several times, then checked the strike screws were long enough to bite the framing. I started keeping pepper spray in my purse and left it by the door when I was home. The first hours after we added the hardware felt different. I kept the door in my sight line from the couch while I worked on a logo. David set the app to push alerts to both our phones. We left the hall light on so a shadow would show under the crack. We didn't talk about the video. Talking wouldn't change anything. I folded laundry at the table so I could hear the hinges if they moved. I walked to the door twice and looked out through the camera's live view. The hallway stayed empty and flat and bright. I learned the details of the lock the way I knew a client's brand guide. I could picture the stack of pins, the way a pick could lift one just high enough to set, the turning pressure that made or broke the job. I kept thinking about the kid's calm posture, the steady hands, the way he had stayed after being surprised the night before. He had worked like he belonged there. The tiny scratches around the keyway were his progress notes. He wasn't guessing. He was going to keep coming until something changed. We changed what we could. I carried the pepper spray even to take out the trash. David checked the bolts before he showered. We texted each other when we were coming home, and whoever got there first waited in the entry for the other. We left shoes out for quick steps. We slept with the bedroom door open and the hallway line of light under the front door in view. For 7 nights, the camera didn't ping for anything but neighbors and deliveries and our own comings and goings. The attempts stopped for a whole week. The drawing started the next week. The camera pinged at 3 a.m. with a clip of a gloved hand coming into frame low and close. The wrist turned and a folded sheet slid under our door. The hand stayed there a second like it wanted to hear us move, then withdrew. We waited until morning to open it. The paper was cheap printer stock with thick pencil lines. It showed the shape of our apartment with walls and doors and the little jut out where the water heater made a closet. He had labeled the front door, the living room, the small kitchen with the narrow counter, and the bedroom. He marked my office with a rectangle and wrote my name next to it. The bed was a rectangle too. It was in the right place. 2 nights later, same time, the camera caught another sheet sliding in. This drawing was worse. He had added measurements, or what looked like steps between rooms. He had a little stick figure in the bed and another next to it. He drew the dresser with handles. He drew the lamp on David's side. I turned the paper in my hands to see if I was missing a trick. It wasn't a guess. He knew the layout. I checked the windows and the door frames. No fresh marks. Nothing on the balcony. We took both sheets to the station. The officer at the desk wrote our case number on a sticky note and paperclipped it to the drawings. He looked at the block letters, the crude lines, and the camera stills. He said they would log it and increase patrols. He said the message didn't have a direct threat. He told us to call 911 if anyone tried the door again. He suggested we stay with friends for a few nights to sleep better. We left with copies of the reports and the same advice as before. The third paper came the next night. The camera caught the sleeve of a black hoodie and a hint of the side of his head, still turned away from the peephole. The sheet scraped as it slid. The drawing showed the view from our living room window. He had sketched the brick building across the street and the fire escape and the cable that sagged between poles. At the bottom, in a square line, he had written in block letters, "See you soon." We taped that one in a clear sleeve and put it with the others. David said we should move now. We still had 8 months on the lease. The landlord didn't pick up on the first call. The second time he said early move-out would mean a big fee. We didn't argue. We packed 2 bags and drove to David's brother's place across town. We stayed there through the weekend. We slept on the pull-out couch and kept our phones face up on the coffee table. The camera in our door caught regular hall traffic, but nothing at 3 a.m. We watched the clips on mute. We didn't talk much. We came home Sunday evening with a box of our things and a plan to recheck the door frame and schedule a locksmith. The hallway felt like it had a draft. Our door looked the same as we left it. Deadbolt thrown, chain latched, no new scratches or dents. Inside, something felt off. I couldn't name it at first. The couch sat under the window, but the throw blanket was folded perfectly. We don't fold it like that. The coffee table had fresh coasters on it, and the stack was fanned like a display. I nudged the table with my shoe and saw the dust outline. The table had been moved left about 2 inches, then settled again. The rug's pattern sat a little crooked. In the bedroom, the picture frames above the dresser were straightened like a level had touched them. The bathroom hand towel was folded in thirds. We don't do thirds. On the kitchen counter sat a vase we didn't own, squat and clear, filled with water and 6 cut gerbera daisies. Bright, new, stems trimmed at an angle. No card. The sink was dry. The dish rack was empty. The smell was floral and sharp in the small room. I opened the fridge. Nothing new there. I checked the drawers. No mess, just straightened. It looked like someone had walked through with a checklist and fixed things that weren't broken. The chain and deadbolt were untouched. The screws sat proud and unmarked. The jamb had no pry marks. There was no new damage anywhere. David called the property manager. She came up with a set of keys on a thick ring and a clipboard. She said no one had requested maintenance. She said housekeeping didn't exist in the building. She looked at the flowers and then at the deadbolt and the chain and went quiet. She told us to call the police. We did. While we waited, I thought back to who had ever stood in our doorway long enough to map things with their eyes. I saw the black hoodie from the videos. I saw the gloved hands. But then another face came in. The food delivery guy from months ago. Ryan. The one who always said he could bring our order up even when I texted that I would come down. The one who stood a beat too long after handing over the bag. The one who smiled and glanced past me like he was curious about our art or our locks. I told David. He pulled up our old receipts. There it was. The name printed in thin type at the bottom, Ryan, and a tip line. We remembered his ball cap with the restaurant's logo and his gray insulated bag bumping the door frame when he leaned in. He had come to our door a lot in those weeks when we were working late. He had learned our schedule by accident or on purpose. We gave the officers his name. The police took it seriously now. They asked for our building's security footage and pulled clips from the neighboring storefronts. They looked at the timestamps on our camera alerts and matched them with the hallway camera and the entrance door. On Sunday afternoon, during a 3-hour window when we were gone, they found him. Ryan came in through the main door with a copied key. No hesitation. He went straight up the stairs, went to our unit, and used the key on our lock. He did not need to pick anything. He stayed inside for 31 minutes, then left with an empty plastic wrapper in his hand. He had thrown the flowers onto our counter and shifted the room like a quiet complaint. They ran him from the delivery company's records to a rented room across town, a week-to-week place with peeling paint and a missing smoke detector. When they arrested him, he didn't fight. His walls were covered with printed photos from my Instagram and LinkedIn. He had taped maps of our neighborhood next to printouts of the building's exterior from Google Street View. He had a folder of my posts, tagged by month. He had a sketchbook with our floor plan drawn again and again like practice. In the notes he had written what he thought my routine was. He had counted lights down hours. He had picked the time David usually left for the gym. They found a small kit in his dresser, a block of soft putty, a set of blanks, a file, and a cheap duplicator clamped to the desk. In one entry, he wrote about making key impressions when he delivered food. He had written that it took only a second if the key was near the door. He had drawn a little picture of a bowl on a narrow table and a hand pressing a blank into a pattern. He had a line about surprising me when David traveled, with a date penciled in for next month. There was a list of things to bring: gloves, flowers, a camera. The case moved faster after that. The DA charged him with stalking and breaking and entering. The prints on the flowers matched him. The video showed him use a key. His journals described what he had done and what he wanted to do. He took a plea. He got 3 years. The judge told him to stay away from us for longer than that. We moved the next month. The new building had 2 doormen and cameras everywhere, and a package room with a lock and a logbook. The front desk called before anyone came up. We never propped our door for a second. I deleted all social media and shut down my old accounts. I changed jobs to a place farther from where we had lived. We bought a small safe for keys and passports. We kept the chain and deadbolt even though the new door was solid metal. David still triple checks our locks every night. I watch him run his thumb under the bolt and tug the handle twice and tilt the chain until it clicks against the track. The violation of someone reorganizing your safe space stays with you. Now I notice every shifted object, every unexpected flower, every delivery person who smiles too long. When I was 15, Emma and I thought we were smart, planning to toilet paper Zoe's house on a Friday night in October. Westfield was the kind of suburb where the biggest drama was a car parked the wrong way. My parents never locked the back door. We waited till 10. Then I pulled a 12-pack of Charmin from under my bed and stuffed it in a backpack. We slipped out through the kitchen. The screen door clicked once behind us. The air had that clean, cold smell you get in fall. We cut through the side yard and ducked into the alley. Our hoodies were dark. Emma had a small flashlight but kept it off. We didn't need it under the streetlights. Puddles from sprinklers made the asphalt shine. Leaves stuck to drains moved a little in the thin wind. We walked fast, heads down when cars passed, stepping into lawns when we heard tires on the next block. The golf course sat low on our left, a black field with flag tips barely moving. The clubhouse kept one light over the service door. A soda can lay beside an oil stain. We stayed on the sidewalk and stayed quiet. Emma whispered how Zoe would freak when she saw the maple wrapped like a mummy. I told her to hit the one by the bay window first. We'd seen Zoe's mom's minivan earlier. No dog. Halloween stuff was already creeping onto porches. A plastic skeleton leaned on a railing, and a bowl of corn scented the doorway. We passed a mulch pile and 2 chairs chained to a post. The neighborhood was quiet in that way where you can hear a TV through a thin wall. I kept the pack high so it didn't swing. Emma giggled and then caught herself. We crossed Oak Lane and cut past the Triangle Park with the brick planter and 2 young trees caged in metal. A candy wrapper clung to a storm grate. The route to Zoe's was easy, a mile tops, but it felt longer, counting mailboxes. A motion light tripped behind us and threw our shadows long. We paused in a hedge until it clicked off. The backpack rustled when I shifted. Emma tapped it with a knuckle like it was a drum. Everything was going smooth until we reached 7th Street. The intersection looked wider there, like the city forgot to paint the crosswalk. The streetlights were too white for the block. 4 cars hugged the curb, 2 sedans, an SUV, and a blue Civic with an expired tag. A busted hubcap lay by the gutter. We stepped off, checked left and right like in elementary school, and started across. Somewhere down the street a car door thumped, echoing between the houses. A dark blue pickup rolled into the intersection and slowed beside us. The window went down with a scratchy sound. The man at the wheel looked about 40, thinning hair, a flannel shirt with greasy stains at the collar. He smiled too wide for the words he used. "What are you 2 young ladies doing out so late?" His voice had that friendly shape that didn't match the eyes. Emma's hand found my sleeve and pulled. He leaned across the bench seat, arm over the passenger side like he owned the road and our answer. He said we should be careful because bad things happen to girls who wander at night. It sounded like a line you read on a flyer, not something he cared about. I said my dad was at the gas station up ahead and we were late to meet him. It came out fast and flat. He kept smiling, but his eyes flicked to the dark station like he knew I was lying. He said he'd give us a ride to make sure we got there safe. His hand moved to the latch like he was going to open the door. We backed away together. "No thanks," I said, and Emma said it too. I lifted the backpack a little to show we were fine. He let the handle go and drummed his fingers on the door. The truck idled loud and rough, exhaust mixed with cold air and wet lawn. An old tree-shaped air freshener swung from the mirror, bleached almost white. The passenger seat was clean except for a folded towel. He crept forward at walking speed as we moved again, keeping level with us like we were in his lane. He said, "Hop in, it's cold," like he was doing us a favor. I kept my face blank and watched the front wheels. Emma's nails pressed through my sleeve. Porch lights were steady, and nobody came out. A TV laugh track bounced off a brick wall. The station ahead was dark, 2 pumps under a canopy, no attendant. When we sped up, he matched it. When we slowed to step around a trash bin, he slowed. We crossed 7th without running. The truck crawled beside us, patient. He kept pace like he was towing us. The tires bumped the gutter and hissed when he corrected. A cigarette burned in the ashtray, and the cab smelled like smoke. I watched his left hand float on the wheel and his right hand hover near the shifter. The radio was off, silent. Emma's steps were short and tight. I told her to keep eyes forward. The truck's mirror caught my face, and I looked down. We passed a mailbox with peeling numbers and a yard sign for a roofer. We kept moving until the next corner. Then he finally accelerated, the engine rising and his taillights shrinking as he took a right without signaling. The street felt open again, but the echo of his voice stayed. Emma leaned close and whispered that we should go home, but I was too stubborn to quit. 5 minutes later, we saw the same blue pickup coming from the opposite direction. He'd circled the block. The high beams hit us hard, flattening the sidewalk into white glare and shadow. He rolled to a stop so close the heat from the engine brushed my legs. The truck door creaked. He started getting out, 1 foot down, weight shifting like he was measuring distance. We bolted. The nearest house was the Millers. Their chain-link fence was low enough to vault. I hit the metal top rail with my thigh and swung my legs. Emma came after, the fence rattling and ringing. As we landed, the German Shepherd in their side yard exploded into barking, claws scraping concrete, chain collar clinking. Porch lights snapped on 2 houses down. The man stood by his truck, door halfway open, watching us under the beams. He didn't shout. He stared for a long second, then slid back into the cab and pulled forward, slow, to the next street over. We stayed crouched by the Miller's recycling bin until the truck noise settled into a steady idle somewhere behind the block. The dog kept barking in bursts and then growling. We kept low, moved along the fence line to where shrubs grew thick and poked through the chain links. There was a gap into the Johnsons' yard where the fences met at a corner. We squeezed through, the metal scraping my hoodie. The Johnsons' grass was damp and stuck to our knees. Their garden shed sat in the back corner, plywood with a tar paper roof, hidden behind overgrown boxwood and a dead rose bush with long thorns. We slid into the narrow slice of space between the shed and the fence. The boards were cool and rough on my back. Emma took the outer edge, shoulder against the chain link. We pulled our hoodies tighter and tucked our hands in. I kept the backpack in my lap, the plastic crinkling when I moved. I could hear the engine idling somewhere close, like a big cat purring. We tried not to breathe loud. He cruised past the Johnsons' place again in a minute, then again after that. For the next 3 hours, the blue pickup made a loop like a timer, passing at least 20 times. Sometimes he didn't slow. Sometimes he parked 2 houses down with the lights off and waited. Then the engine would growl, and he'd roll forward and stop again, different angle, as if he was building a map. The high beams swept across the hedge tops and caught the shed roof edge in a hard line. Sometimes he parked and got out. He had a flashlight, not big, with a narrow beam. He checked under hedges, poked light into the gaps between trash cans, and shook gate latches to see which ones would give. The metal rattles carried through the yards. At one point, he went into the yard across the street and checked around a kid's plastic slide. Another time, the light washed over the miller's side path, and the dog started up again. He stayed calm and kept moving, heel to toe, like he was used to doing this. Once he came into the Johnsons' yard. He used the side gate. The latch had a slack loop, and it bumped just once. His boots pressed the grass flat and left dark marks behind him. He stood by the corner of the shed where the bushes thinned, maybe 10 feet from us. The flashlight beam scratched across the fence and the shed wall, then stopped on a rake leaning against the boards. He held the light down and muttered to himself, words I couldn't catch, low and even. His breath made a small white cloud in the cold. My knees started to cramp and I pushed my heel into the dirt to keep it from kicking against the metal. He stood there long enough that I counted the screws in the fence post cap. Then he turned and walked back out, the gate latch clicking once. Emma had her phone on silent. She held it at her chest and kept the lens pointed at gaps in the bush. The red dot glowed for a second. Then she covered it with her thumb. She recorded when the beams swept by, when the latch rattled, when he walked. We didn't talk. When the light landed near us, we pressed back into the rough siding and held our breath. We listened to tires, to the idle, to the occasional car from far off. Sprinklers popped on in a yard up the block and then clicked off. A train horn, faint, an airplane. Around 3 a.m., he seemed to give up the foot search. He stopped coming through gates and stopped walking the sidewalks. He still drove. He kept the same patrol route, engine low, windows down. Sometimes the truck rolled by at 5 miles an hour. Sometimes a little faster. The high beams came on, then off. He tested them on corners and at the cross street, like he wanted to trap anything moving. My legs went numb from the crouch. Pins and needles came and went. I shifted weight with tiny moves so the bushes wouldn't shake. Emma wiped her face with the back of her wrist. Her tears made little streaks on the dirt. She kept the phone steady. The sky changed slow. The black turned gray at the edges of the houses. Porch lights turned off one by one. At 5:30, the birds started making small sounds in the hedges. A paper delivery guy made a quick run past the far end of the block. The truck didn't show for that pass. We watched through the gap for a full 30 minutes and saw no blue pickup. We didn't wait longer than that. We pulled ourselves out from the wedge and stood up slow. Knees shook and then held. We checked the street both ways. No truck, no lights, no engine. We cut into the backyard route we knew from bike rides, using fences and hedges as cover. We hopped the Johnson's back fence into the narrow service alley with gravel and a row of trash bins. The lids were wet with dew. We moved along garage backs and cut through where boards were missing at the bottom. A cat shot along a wall and vanished under a deck. We made the park by the school and stayed low along the baseball diamond fence. The grass was cold and left dark streaks on our jeans. We climbed 3 more fences and crossed a cul-de-sac, then cut through the side of a property with a low stone wall. A motion light clicked, but we were already past it and under the big spruce by the lot line. The backpack thumped my spine with each hop. Toilet paper rolls knocked each other and made soft knocks. We skirted a big puddle that shined like a mirror after the sprinklers. We crossed the last alley and saw my block. The houses were quiet. A garbage truck clanked 2 streets over. My parents were still asleep when we slipped the gate and went up the back steps. My hands were dirty and left prints on the rail. We eased the back door with 2 fingers so it wouldn't squeal, and then stepped into the mudroom. The clock on the microwave said 6:08. The house smelled like coffee from yesterday and laundry detergent. We were shaking, cold and fast, and covered in dirt and grass seeds. In a bad mix of adrenaline and panic, we made a stupid plan. If someone saw us outside, if anyone asked, we needed a reason. We took the toilet paper out of the backpack and went to the front yard. The maple there was thinner than Zoe's, but good enough. We threw the first roll over the lowest branch, and it looped back with a dull slap. We threw again and again. White streamers hung down and moved a little in the breeze. Paper tore and stuck on the bark. We wrapped the trunk in a fast spiral, pulled it tight, and tied it off. It looked like a cheap costume. Bits of paper stuck to the wet grass like confetti. Mom woke to the noise of the front door and came out onto the porch in a robe. Her hair was pulled up with a clip. She saw the mess and went straight to yelling about respect and neighbors and sleep. She didn't ask where we had been. She assumed we had been goofing in our own yard all night. We nodded, said sorry, and started pulling paper down right away so it didn't get worse. The roll cores hit the porch with hollow knocks. The sun was up over the roofs and made the mess obvious. We never told anyone what really happened. Not Zoe. Not my parents. We didn't feel like heroes or victims. We just cleaned up the yard, showered, and slept until noon. For the next week, we walked home in daylight and watched for a blue truck. We didn't see it again. 2 weeks later, Emma sent me a link. It was a local news article from 3 towns over. A man in a blue pickup had tried to pull a jogger into his truck before sunrise. She got away and called 911. Police arrested him that same morning. The article had a photo. The man looked exactly like our guy. Same thinning hair. Same face. He wore a flannel shirt with dark stains at the collar in the mugshot. We got lucky that night. Luckier than we deserved for sneaking out over something as dumb as toilet paper. I was 10 in 1998 when the Clinton impeachment filled every channel and every adult mouth in our DC suburb. My father worked as an analyst at the Pentagon, which sounded huge to other kids. But to me, it just meant he came home late and brought tense people with him. That November evening, our house turned into a small bar by accident. Coats piled on the banister, boots in a messy line by the door, a dozen of Dad's colleagues packed into the living room. Cans and bottles crowded the coffee table, while the TV replayed the hearings, and everyone argued over them. Someone slapped the arm of the sofa every time a clip reran. The sound carried up the stairs like a metronome. I went upstairs when they started circling the same words: perjury, deposition, subpoena. The voices rose and fell in waves, with short, hard laughs when someone landed a line. I shut my door and sat cross-legged on the carpet with my silver Discman. Blink 182 spilled through the foam headphones, a little warble when I pressed on the lid. The window over my desk faced the backyard, a flat square of dark with the old tool shed tilted near the tree line. The motion light by the back door had burned out weeks earlier, so the only glow outside came soft from the kitchen window and a weak porch light down the block. My desk was a chipboard slab Dad had screwed to the wall. I had my notebook open, but I was sketching instead, copying the outline of our garage from a photo taped to the lamp. The house creaked and flexed. When the living room roared, the floor under my chair trembled a little. I liked knowing where everyone was. It made the rest of the house feel mapped out, like there were no empty spaces for anything else. Outside, the shed's padlock showed as a small pale dot, and the roof looked scaly where the shingles curled. Dad called it a spring project. Mom wanted it gone. Nothing changed except the sagging got worse. I switched tracks, thumbed the wheel, and traced the garage door lines again. A thin draft squeezed through the window frame and pushed at the paper. I set an eraser on the corner and glanced out of habit. At first, the yard was just black shapes. Then, near the trees, something peeled away from the dark and moved. I took one earphone off to listen. The music hissed in one ear. Downstairs, someone said, "He lied to the country." And another voice laughed too loud. The shape slid forward a few steps and stopped, like it was listening back to the house. I stood and the chair legs scraped. I paused the Discman and leaned toward the glass, splitting the blinds with 2 fingers. Whatever was out there was on our side of the fence. It didn't have the jitter of an animal. It moved with purpose, hugging the darkest lanes between the garage shadow and the shrubs. A man in dark clothing stepped into view enough that I could make out a jacket that hung straight and a head turning toward the windows, then away. He moved like he'd studied the yard before tonight. When the living room hit another loud patch, the man flattened behind Mom's rose bushes, the bare canes wired into hoops for winter. He stayed low until the noise dropped. Then he stepped out and began along the siding, stopping at each first-floor window. He didn't touch the glass. He leaned in, checked, and slid to the next like he had a checklist. The furnace kicked on, and the ducks hummed. I could hear forks tap plates and a burst of TV crowd noise. He kept close to the wall and used the garage shadow like he had measured it in daylight. At the kitchen window, he froze again when laughter rolled up, then moved once it passed. He looked average height and average build, maybe mid-40s, but the distance ate detail. His head turned once toward the patio, and then he kept going. He pulled something from inside his jacket, narrow and dark, and headed straight for the shed. He didn't study the lawn or look up. He went directly, like he already knew the steps. At the door, he didn't try the padlock. He reached up under the eaves where the wood had gone soft and black. His fingers disappeared into a gap like he knew it was there. He stepped onto the concrete block that kept the door from dragging and worked under the eaves with both hands. The corner of the roof caught a sliver of kitchen light. The rest was all shadow. Dry flakes of wood shook loose and drifted down onto the threshold. He kept his head tucked and his shoulders quiet. I watched his elbows make small, efficient circles, in and out, like he was threading something or fishing something out. I didn't move the headphone cord when it brushed my wrist. I didn't call for anyone. The hallway outside my room was cold and empty. I kept 2 fingers on the blinds to stop them from rattling and tried to see whether he was placing something or taking something. From the second floor, the angle was wrong. I couldn't tell. A car rolled past out front, tires humming, and the weak wash of its headlights died at the side gate. The man didn't glance toward the street. He worked like he had 2 minutes, like a timer I couldn't hear was counting down. I counted to 30 twice without meaning to, then started again. Downstairs, a bottle clinked and someone said, "That's politics," with a tight laugh. In the small quiet that followed, I thought I heard a faint scrape from the shed roof. Not loud, more like fabric on rough wood. He shifted his feet on the block to keep his reach, and the roses didn't shake even though he was inches away. I pressed my forehead to the glass and felt the cold. I thought about the dead motion light and Dad promising to fix it before the first snow. He didn't test the door. He didn't tug the lock. He stayed under the eaves with that narrow tool and the steady hands of someone who didn't need to guess. I looked for his face and got only angles and either a brimless cap or hair close to the skull. The distance ate detail. His jacket didn't shine. His shoes didn't squeak. He moved like he did this for work. Another car passed, and the sound washed by and was gone. I tried to think of what could be hidden inside a rotten strip of wood. I came up with nothing I liked. A small chip fell and landed on the threshold, pale against black. That I saw clearly. I told myself I would count to 60, and then I would do something. Tell Dad. Turn on the kitchen light to see if he's spooked. Bang the window. Instead, I kept watching. The people below me argued about the word future and whether it belonged to anyone. The TV threw a weak parade of color against the ceiling of the stairwell. The house felt busy and loud and far away from the part that mattered. He adjusted his stance again and reached deeper. The shed's roofline made a sharp dark V against the trees. My fingers hurt from pressing the blinds apart. I eased them, and the plastic made a tiny tick. He didn't react. He worked like a metronome, small motions repeating, shoulders steady, head low. The padlock hung there unused, bright and dumb. The tool in his hand slid in and out of the gap, while his other hand steadied the rotten edge. Every few seconds he paused, like he was checking alignment with his thumb, then kept at it. The minutes stretched thin, and I let them pass without breathing much. I told myself again that at 60, I would move. I didn't move. He spent maybe 2 minutes doing something up there, his arms moving in practiced motions. My heart was pounding so hard I thought he might hear it through the window. I ran downstairs, taking the steps 2 at a time, and my heels slid on the second to last tread. I caught the railing and swung into the living room. The TV lit faces, and the debate froze. For a second, nobody talked. Dad stood up fast, like someone had said his name. He took one look at me and waved me toward the kitchen. Jim, the tall guy with the shaved head who always stayed quiet, pushed off the wall and followed us in. I told Dad what I saw. Short sentences. Man in our yard. Dark clothes. Check the windows. He went to the shed and reached under the roof. I pointed at the back door. Jim didn't ask questions. He grabbed Dad's arm and said, "We evacuate. Now." Dad nodded. He walked out to the living room and used the same voice he used when the smoke alarm beeped once a year. He told everyone we were leaving through the front door and going next door to the Andersons' house. No one argued. People stood, grabbed coats, found their keys. Mom appeared in the hall already zipping her jacket. She opened the closet and pulled out the emergency bag she had put together after Oklahoma City. It was a green duffel with 2 flashlights taped together on top. She put one strap over her shoulder and checked my face for a second, then turned to the door. Jim had his phone out. He was already talking. He used words that sounded like a list, and then said our address. He listened, said, "Affirmative," and kept moving. We went out into the cold front yard. Our breath made short clouds. The Andersons' porch light was on. Mrs. Anderson opened her door without asking why, and stepped aside so people could file in. I looked over my shoulder at our house, at the dark slice of side yard where the shed sat out of sight behind the garage. The living room window showed only TV light. Jim paced at the curb with his phone to his ear, and his other hand flat against his chest, still listening, still talking in short parts. Within 10 minutes, 3 black SUVs rolled up without sirens. They stopped quick, doors opened, and men in windbreakers moved in different directions like they had a plan already. The jackets said FBI in big letters. 2 went straight for the backyard gate. 1 went to Dad and asked for a quick summary. Dad pointed toward the kitchen and the yard beyond it. Another man stood in our driveway, hand up to stop any cars that might come down the street. Our neighbors opened curtains. We stayed inside the Andersons' living room. It smelled like cinnamon and dryer sheets. I stood by the window with Mom. Dad went outside with an agent for a minute, then came back in and told us to stay put. Jim never hung up his phone. He talked into it while looking out at the street like he was measuring something. The FBI set up small cones and tape at our front walk. 2 men went around the back again. Flashlights moved through the trees like moving stars. The bomb squad arrived about 20 minutes later in a boxy truck with heavy compartments. They parked across the street and started unloading cases. More tape went up. An officer knocked on doors up and down the block and told people to stay inside and away from windows. Our whole street turned into a boundary. Mrs. Anderson turned off her porch light without being told, and then went to the kitchen. She made hot chocolate and handed mugs to people with hands that shook a little. We watched through a narrow part in the curtains. In our yard, agents in protective gear, helmets, face shields, thick gloves, moved slow and careful toward the shed. They kept their bodies turned away, like they had learned to do that. 1 carried a coiled cable. Another carried a small robot on a flat metal tray and set it down at the gate. They drove it by remote. It rolled across the grass on rubber tracks, little antenna bobbing, a camera eye glowing. It stopped, spun a small arm, and looked up under the eaves where the wood was rotten. Time crawled. People whispered behind us. The Andersons' clock ticked loud on the wall. Our house looked normal in the dark, like nothing was wrong. Around midnight, the robot reversed and a tech crouched beside it to check its feed. Then they brought out a long-handled tool and a narrow box. They moved the tool into position like surgeons. Another agent pointed a light at a very exact angle at the shed. They worked in short bursts and then backed away each time. When they were ready, 2 agents went forward and carefully removed a package. It was about the size of a shoebox, wrapped in dull tape, with wires tucked neat along one side. They placed it into the narrow box and shut the lid. Everyone took 1 synchronized step back. An agent came to our door and asked for Dad. In the foyer, low voice, he told Dad the device was homemade but sophisticated. It had enough explosive to blow the shed apart and push damage into the back of the house. The detonator was cellular. Someone could have triggered it from anywhere, anytime, by calling it or sending a signal. They found partial prints on the tape that held it in place. Dad's face went the color of paper when the agent said there had been 3 similar cases that year. Same build, same kind of trigger, same materials. He asked for the dates. The agent said the dates and the cities. Dad stared at the floor and then nodded once. The agent went back outside and spoke into his radio. They took the package to the truck in a tight line and drove away slow. The rest of the team stayed and kept working at the shed, checking for anything else. We slept at the Andersons on their pull-out sofa with our clothes on. 2 agents sat in a dark car at the curb, engine idling. At dawn, we went back next door. The shed door hung open. The lock was still there, useless. The rotten strip under the eaves had been pried wider to show the cavity inside. There was black dust on the threshold and fresh marks along the edge where the tape had held. Our lawn had boot prints in lines. By afternoon, the FBI told Dad what they had. The explosives used matched a batch traced to a militia group. The group had been watching government employees who worked on foreign policy. They had lists, license plates, patterns. They had been monitoring Dad because of a classified report he had written on military intervention overseas. They didn't say the content, only that it had angered the wrong people. The device in our shed matched the pattern. The partial fingerprints from the tape hit on a man with a record that fit the group. 2 days later, they arrested him at a motel in Virginia off the highway. He used cash and a fake name that didn't hold up. They took 4 other members of his cell at the same time in different spots. The agents told Dad in a plain voice. They didn't smile. They said the man had a car key with a tiny nick from our gate. He had tools in his bag that matched the marks under our eaves. He had a phone with recent calls that matched the trigger protocol. The case, they said, would be strong. After that, life changed shape. We had federal protection for 6 months. An agent waited outside our house at night in an unmarked car. In the morning, another car followed us to school. 2 times a week, a team checked our windows and the fence in the shed until the shed was finally torn down. When we went to the grocery store, an agent stood near the entrance and looked at the parking lot while we loaded bags. It felt like a routine that came with its own equipment and checklists. Dad was transferred to a different department. He went to a building with a different badge and a shorter title on his desk. He came home earlier. He didn't bring colleagues over. He sat at the table with a blank legal pad and a pencil, and then put both away when the phone rang. Mom started packing boxes. We moved to a new neighborhood across town where no one knew about the tape or the robot or the midnight truck. The new house had a clean yard with no shed. The motion light worked. Agents stepped down one by one. First, the extra car went away. Then the night patrol stopped. Then we were alone again. Once, at a follow-up meeting, an investigator shook my hand and said if I hadn't been at the window at that exact time, it would have ended differently. He said it without drama. He slid a card across the table and told us to call if we saw anything unusual. We put the card in a kitchen drawer next to tape and scissors and a notepad. Weeks passed. School projects, new bus route, different street names. Sometimes I woke up and could picture the man in our yard as clear as if he stood at the rose bushes again, jacket straight, head low, hands busy under the eaves. It wasn't a story in my head. It was a set of movements. He was careful, methodical. Inside the house that night, people had laughed at a joke I didn't hear. In the yard, he had placed death under our shed in quiet motions, and then left without a sound. Even now, I could see the pale chip of wood on the threshold like a loose tooth. Years later, I could list the steps from that night in order, and not get them wrong. The stairs, the kitchen, Jim's hand on Dad's arm, the bag from the closet, the code words on the phone, the black SUVs at the curb, the tape going up, the robot at the shed, the box being carried away, the knock at the door, the move across town, the new light over the back door that turned on when a raccoon crossed the fence, the card in the drawer. My parents never hosted political discussions at our house again. I was 19 at the University of Miami, still learning the shortcuts between buildings and where to get decent coffee that didn't taste burnt. Everyone in my dorm had a dating app, so one Sunday I made a profile. 2 spring break photos, 1 lab coat selfie, and a line about hiking and Netflix. It was basic on purpose. That night my phone buzzed with a flood of messages. Most were lazy, emojis, hey, a few weird comments. I swiped past them and kept the app open while I reviewed notes. Then I saw Silver Fox 47. His name on the profile was Richard. The bio said he owned several restaurants in Fort Lauderdale. His photos looked like corporate headshots. Gray at the temples, clean shirt, tie loosened. His first message was careful and normal. He complimented my smile and asked about marine biology. He referenced a coral bleaching documentary and asked my opinion. It felt like someone actually reading what I wrote, not just tossing a line. I answered, and he responded in full sentences. We chatted every day that week. He replied fast, but not pushy. He asked about lab hours, lecture lengths, and the intro course load, but it didn't feel like an interrogation. He joked that he lived on espresso and payroll software. He said restaurant life started early and ended late. On day 3, he sent a cappuccino with a fish drawn in the foam and wrote, "A toast to your future fieldwork." It was corny. I still smiled. He didn't ask for my number or extra photos. I took that as respectful. I kept my messages inside the app and left out specifics. I told him I loved the campus lake and the noise at the student center. He said he hired a lot of students and respected anyone balancing work and school. He talked about vendors and margins like weather. It wasn't flirty. It felt steady and a little boring. Boring felt safe. He asked what research I wanted to do after graduation. I wrote about reefs and field seasons. He said Miami was a good place to start. By the end of the week, I knew his basics. 47, divorced, no kids. He said he liked mentoring younger staff. He mentioned running, but said his knees were not friendly. He sent a photo of a food cost report to joke about sticker shock. Sometimes he texted at 5 a.m., and he said it was because deliveries came early. His distance on the app hovered around 30 miles. I noticed the little odd things, but I told myself that was normal for someone older who managed a business. I saw small inconsistencies. 2 photos had the same window view but different captions about different cities. The lighting was too clean for casual shots. He never talked about running again. None of it felt like danger. It felt like curation. I stayed cautious, kept things general, and focused on work. Exams were coming. My head was full of lab safety and deadlines. The app was background noise most days. On Friday, I went to my usual coffee shop near campus to study. It was a narrow place with a window to a slow street, a short bar with metal stools, and small square tables squeezed into a line. The outlet I liked sat under a wooden ledge near the back. I looped my backpack strap around my ankle, opened my laptop, and worked through flashcards. Between cards, I answered Richard's question about my favorite marine invertebrate. I said urchins. He made a bad joke about spines and deadlines. I rolled my eyes. Saturday morning he asked, "Which residential village are you in?" I wrote, "On campus by the lake." He replied, "Nice area." Then he asked which buildings my classes were in. He framed it as wanting to picture my day. He added, "Miami can be dangerous. Don't cut through dark spots." I told him I didn't give exact locations. He replied, "Smart." Then he asked what time I usually left for class and if I walked alone. He added, "Just want you safe." It read polite. It landed wrong. Sunday night he suggested we meet for coffee near campus. Public place, my treat. 30 minutes. I wasn't ready for in-person. I sent, "Not yet." He answered, "Totally fair. Maybe another time." He sent a photo of grilled snapper on a plate and said the plating sucked. I sent a laughing emoji and closed the app. I went back to my notes and tried to ignore the little push on my boundaries. Monday morning he messaged before my lab asking about my routine again. He said he read about a mugging near campus. I searched and didn't see anything current. I didn't reply. Lab ran long and smelled like ethanol and gloves. When I checked the app after, I had 3 messages. Hope lab went well. Please be careful. Then, I'm in Coral Gables for business today. His profile had always shown him 30 miles away. I tapped the distance. It now said less than a mile. He followed with, "I can see campus from where I'm sitting." The app showed less than a mile. Then he sent a street name I walked every morning. Not a main road, just a cut-through lined with white stucco and lumpy sidewalks where ficus roots pushed up the slabs. I knew every crack in that curb. Another ping. He said he picked a quick espresso spot near the north edge because parking by the garage was bad. He said the patio caught the breeze. He said, "It's a good place to study." He described it like a map. Door right, register ahead, pastry case left, 2 high tops by the window, long bar with a wobbly third stool. Then a line that froze me. "You sit 2 tables from back by outlet." He wrote the name. I read his description of the exact coffee shop where I studied every morning. The messages started coming faster. At first it was him saying he had driven down just to meet me and that I was being rude. Then he said he could tell I was online and ignoring him. That was true. I was screenshotting everything, hands tight on the phone, saving each message and the time. Another ping came with an image. It was a photo of my dormitory taken from the parking lot, the angle low like from a car window. I checked the timestamp in the corner. 5 minutes old. He wrote that he would wait there until I came out. I had never told him the building name. I watched the blue dots move in the typing window, and then another line appeared. He wrote the colors I wore in my profile photo and said he would recognize me anywhere. He added, "Don't be shy." I blocked him. I went into settings and deleted the app. The screen went white, then back to my home page. The damage was done. He knew where I lived, where I studied, and enough pieces of my schedule to guess the rest. I unplugged my laptop and stuffed everything into my backpack. I slipped out the back door of the coffee shop and kept to main paths with people. That night I stayed in a friend's apartment off campus. We pulled the blinds and kept the TV on low. I didn't sleep much. In the morning I emailed my professors that I would attend lectures on Zoom if possible for a few days. I told my RA I had a safety concern and would be staying with a friend. I didn't give details. I changed my walking routes. I used different exits. I studied in random buildings and kept my head up when I crossed streets. I told 2 people where I would be every hour and checked in on time. On campus, I moved fast and didn't linger by doors. I ate in crowded places. I kept my phone in my hand and my keys in my pocket. I avoided the coffee shop. I kept thinking about the angle of that parking lot photo. He had been close to the door. I watched parked cars without moving, scanning for faces or for phones held at odd angles. I saw nothing that matched him. For 3 days, it was quiet. By the 3rd day, I started to think maybe it had been a push to scare me into a meeting. Maybe he had given up and left. I didn't relax, but I went to a study group and then back to my friend's place. Thursday afternoon, my phone buzzed with a call from campus security. The officer asked me to come to their office. The building was near the main gate, 1st floor, glass front, a row of chairs against the wall. I signed in and waited until a tall officer opened a door and waved me in. Inside a small room, they had a monitor with a paused clip of security footage. The officer said there had been an incident the night before. A middle-aged man had tried to follow a female student into her dorm. When she turned and screamed for help, he ran back out. In the rush, he dropped a notebook. Another officer placed it on the table in front of me inside a clear bag. On the cover was a grocery store brand label, black marker lines across it. They pressed play. The footage showed a man standing by the entrance, head down like he was texting. He wore a baseball cap and a plain polo, but when he looked up, the angle caught his face. He was the same man from the profile photos, only older and heavier. The jawline was softer. The eyes were the same. He waited until a student swiped in, then tried to slip behind her. She blocked him with her shoulder and reached for the desk phone. He pivoted and hurried out. They slid the notebook scan across the table on the monitor. Inside were pages with names, dorm buildings, and times written in neat block letters. There were 5 students listed. My name was there, my dorm, classes approximated with good detail, and notes like, studies early at Mar Coffee Shop, and walks alone after lab. He had drawn small maps for each. Next to my name, he had underlined Marine Bio and 19. The officer said they had connected him to multiple reports of someone watching from parked cars by the residence halls and the athletic fields. Security told me they were coordinating with police. They had posted officers near entrances and pushed an alert to RAs. They asked me to keep my changed routines for now and to report any message or phone call from unknown numbers. I told them I had deleted the app. They asked to see my screenshots. I airdropped them and then left the building with an escort to the gate. My friend met me by the curb and we drove straight back to her apartment. We locked the door and stood listening. The fridge hummed. Outside, nothing. The next morning, a detective called. He said they had made an arrest at a budget motel on a commercial strip not far from campus. He asked me to come in. The station smelled like old coffee and sanitizer. In an interview room, he introduced himself and explained the basics. The man's real name was Robert Walsh. He had been staying at the motel for a week. The room was paid in cash, day by day. When they searched it, they found a laptop, a stack of prepaid phones, and a bag with toiletries and clothes. In the bathroom was a small zip pouch with blister packs and 2 small bottles. They showed me photos of the laptop screen. There were profiles on multiple dating apps, all with different names and photos, but the same style of bio. The targets were college-age users across Florida. Folders on the desktop were labeled by school names and months. Inside each were screenshots and copied bios. Some had lists of favorite places mentioned in chats. There were logs with message times. In a document with my name were lines from our conversation, organized into bullet points. Underlined notes read, "Coffee shop near North Edge, outlet seat, Lab Mon mornings." I looked at the date created. It matched the week we spoke. The detective said there were similar files for dozens of students. He didn't show me the worst ones, but he said 2 students from other schools had gone on dates with him and later reported sexual assault. Their reports matched the pattern in his notes. Find, meet in public, suggest a second location, control the transport. In the motel nightstand, they found a box with 4 small vials, labeled with a pharmacy name from out of state. In the mini fridge, they found more bottles. Field tests came back as common date rape drugs. In a drawer, there were restraints and a folding knife. They asked if I would give a statement and turn over the screenshots. I did. They asked about our chats and if he had ever pushed for a meeting off campus or a ride. I told them he had pushed for coffee and claimed he was already nearby. They asked if I had any reason to believe he knew my full name before the dorm photo. I told them I used my first name only on the app. They said he likely matched details from my bio to public information. The detective's words were precise, no drama. He said the case would move fast because of the evidence from the motel and the notebook. The arrest hit the campus rumor mill within a day. Security sent a campus-wide email with general safety advice. They didn't name him, but people shared the footage stills. I avoided every thread. I went to class, sat near doors, and left early. I met the detective twice more to confirm dates and times. When charges were filed, he called and told me the counts: stalking, attempted kidnapping, and possession of controlled substances with intent. He said the prosecutors were contacting the 2 other students. In court, Robert looked smaller than in the footage. He didn't look at me. I sat in the back row and left when it ended. Months later, I got the call that he had taken a deal. 15 years. I wrote the date on a sticky note and put it in a folder with my screenshots and the security email. The university added cameras by the dorm entrances and changed the way guests checked in. RAs held floor meetings on online safety. They gave handouts about privacy settings and what not to share. I didn't date again for almost 2 years. When I tried, I kept everything on the app at first, and met only in public, midday, with exit plans. I didn't share my building, my routine, or my friends' names. I reported any profile that pushed for details too fast. That polished businessman persona had been a mask built for students like me, and I had almost treated it like a compliment instead of a warning. That charming businessman persona had been completely fabricated, and I'd almost walked right into his trap because I was too polite to trust my instincts about the age gap feeling wrong. I was sorting mail last September when I found an envelope addressed to my 8-year-old son Ethan in careful block letters. It was thick, bright white, and the name sat centered like someone measured the spacing. There was no return address, no postmark. The flap was sealed with 2 small star stickers. It had been slid into our mailbox sometime that morning. The regular carrier never leaves things like that without a stamp. I stood by the kitchen counter with the junk flyers and bills spread out and just looked at it. The house was quiet except for Max's nails ticking on the hardwood. I turned it over and checked again for any clue who sent it. Nothing. The paper felt like cardstock. The glue on the flap was neat, not the messy kind you see with kids. I took a butter knife and opened it along the edge. Inside was a handmade invitation on folded construction paper, decorated with store-bought stickers, balloons, smiling controllers, pizza slices, gold trophies. In bubble letters, it invited Ethan to a special party for special kids at the old Merchant's Warehouse on Industrial Boulevard. It said the party would be on Saturday at 3 p.m. It promised video games, pizza, and prizes. The bottom line said this was a secret celebration just for chosen kids, and telling adults would ruin everything. I read it twice and then sat down. The handwriting wasn't childish. The loops were tight, the spacing even. They had drawn a Minecraft creeper with a green marker on the corner, not perfect but recognizable. The message included Ethan's name 3 times, like it was meant to feel personal. It also mentioned our golden retriever by name, Max, and said there would be a dog surprise. That part made me pause. It also listed Tyler, Ethan's best friend from our street, as someone who might be there if he was good. Someone had put time into this, and they knew details you don't get from a public post. I felt the normal morning turn into something else. I looked at the envelope again and checked the mailbox through the window. The lid was still open a crack from when I pulled the mail. The street was quiet. A delivery truck 2 houses down groaned into gear and left. I tried to think of any school flyer or birthday list, any parent who might set up something like this, and nothing came to mind. Merchant's Warehouse flashed in my head as a burnt-out building I pass when I take the bypass. I remembered the boarded windows and the black soot on the bricks. It hadn't been open in years. The idea of kids there did not make sense. I unfolded the card again, slower. There were faint pencil lines under the marker letters like someone had traced their own guide. The tone of the words pushed secrecy in a way that did not sound like a child. Chosen kids. Ruin everything. I put it flat on the counter and took a photo with my phone. Then I checked the back of the card in case there was a phone number. In tiny handwriting near the fold, almost hidden under a sticker, there was a line that made my chest lock up. If you show this to your parents, Max might get hurt. I stood still and read it again to make sure I was not seeing it wrong. The letters were small and sharp. The threat was specific. It didn't say, "Don't tell." It aimed at our dog, like the person had been within sight of our yard and knew what mattered to Ethan. I looked toward the sliding door. Max's bowl sat on the mat, dry. Max himself thumped his tail under the table, not understanding any of it, just watching me. I picked up the card with both hands and tried not to smudge it. I called my husband at work and told him what I had. Then I looked up the FBI's Crimes Against Children unit and called. I kept my voice steady and gave our address and the exact text on the card. The woman on the line asked me not to touch anything else. She said agents would come right away. I closed the curtains on the front windows and locked the back door. I told Ethan, who was in his room building a Lego car, that I needed him to stay with me in the kitchen. I set Max's leash by the door in case we needed to move fast. I watched the street until a plain sedan slowed and parked a few houses down. 2 agents arrived within an hour. They parked up the street and walked in without lights. They wore plain clothes and showed IDs, then photographed the envelope and the card where they lay. One agent slid each item into a plastic sleeve with tweezers. They said they'd rush fingerprint and handwriting analysis. They asked if anyone besides me had handled it. I said no. They asked what time I checked the mailbox and if I had seen anyone near the house that morning. I gave the times. About 10:15 a.m. for the mail, earlier for the dog walk. They asked whether Ethan had mentioned any party or any adult who talked to him. I said no, and that the school requires visitor sign-in. They had us walk through Ethan's routine step by step. We traced his walk to school along Cedar Street, the crosswalk with the crossing guard, the alley he used to cut time until we told him to stop, the spot where Tyler's mom picks them up on Tuesdays for soccer. We listed soccer practice days, the field at the park, the Saturday games, the usual weekend errands. We talked about who knew our dog's name besides family. I gave names of neighbors who had called to Max over the fence. The agents wrote everything down and circled names. They asked about the merchant's warehouse. It had been closed for 3 years after a fire. The agents already knew that. They said the site was isolated, with no security cameras and multiple exits. One of them showed me a satellite view on a tablet. The building sat back from the road behind a chain-link fence that had gaps. There were loading bay doors on the south side and a side door that opened to a dirt lot. If someone wanted to bring a kid in or out without being seen, there were ways. By evening, they were setting up surveillance equipment around our house. A small camera tucked into the porch light, another facing the driveway from a stake in the shrubs, a motion sensor near the side gate. They told us how to go about our normal schedule while they watched for a person returning to the scene. They also assigned an undercover officer to watch Ethan's school. The second letter arrived on Wednesday before sunrise. I found it on the hallway rug when I went to make coffee at 6:10 a.m. It had been slid under our front door while we slept, past the deadbolt, past the chain, and past the surveillance the agents had installed. The envelope was the same kind of thick white, the same block letters, the same careful spacing of my son's name. The flap was sealed with a single smiley face sticker this time. I didn't touch it with my hands. I used a paper towel to pick it up and set it on the kitchen counter. Inside there was a photo and a note. The photo froze me. It showed Ethan at school recess, in the blue hoodie he wore on Tuesdays, kicking a red rubber ball near the fence. The angle was high and distant, flattened by a long lens. The chain-link diamonds were soft in the foreground, so the shooter had been outside the schoolyard. On the back of the photo, the date was written in pencil from the day before. The note was short and printed in the same tight letters as before. Saturday, 3 p.m. Come alone or your sister pays. The word sister was underlined twice. Lily is 5. I called the agents. They arrived fast, took new photos, and put the envelope, the note, and the print into sleeves. They checked the door for tool marks or tape. They reviewed the porch camera on a tablet. At 3:12 a.m., a thin shape stepped into the frame only as a blur at the edge, bent low, and then the motion sensor tripped wide, and the image turned grainy from the IR flare. No face, no plate, shoes and a dark cap, that was all. The agent pinched the bridge of his nose and said the person had studied the camera angle. They took the photo to their office lab. By noon, they called back. The paper stock and the back code matched a specific batch that had been sold at one store in our county. The agents pulled the credit card records for anyone who had bought that brand and size in the last month. The list was short. 3 names stood out, men with prior charges involving minors. The agents brought printed photos to our table. I looked at each face under the kitchen light. I recognized one before they even spoke. I had seen him more than once at our grocery store, always in the toy aisle. He wore a ball cap then too. He had once told me he had nephews Ethan's age and asked if the Lego set on sale was a good one. I had said yes and kept walking. His name on the paper was Mark Thompson. The agents confirmed he had been released on parole 6 months earlier. They showed his parole office address and his listed vehicle, a gray van with tinted windows. They said they would move fast. They started planning for Saturday. They laid a map of the neighborhood and the warehouse area on our dining table. One team would cover the approaches to Industrial Boulevard. Another would go inside the building the day before to plant cameras and audio. An undercover agent who looked young would be positioned at the warehouse as bait. They showed me a photo of the agent with a hoodie and a backpack and said he would sit on a crate and play with a handheld console. Another team would sit beyond the tree line with binoculars. They said I would drive Ethan's normal Saturday route so anyone watching would see the same pattern. Ethan himself would not be with me. He would be at the station with another officer in a room with a couch, a TV, and snacks. Lily would be with my sister across town. We would not change visible routines too much. The idea was to keep the suspect from getting scared off, but not put anyone in reach. They told me to keep my phone on and to follow the exact timing we wrote down. On Saturday, I started the car at 2 p.m. I buckled a child-sized jacket into Ethan's booster so it looked right from a distance. I drove past the soccer field at the normal time. I drove by Tyler's house and waved at his mother through the windshield the same way I always did, and she waved back with a tight face because she'd been briefed. I turned past the church lot and down the long road toward Industrial Boulevard. The sky was overcast, and the wind carried loose gravel across the shoulder. I checked my dash clock at each turn and kept it steady. The radio was off. At 2:35 p.m., I passed the closed lumberyard. At 2:40, I reached the first intersection near the warehouse and kept going so I did not look like I was slowing to watch. The agent on my phone said everything was in place. At 2:47 p.m., as the teams watched, a gray van with tinted windows rolled up to the gate cut in the chain-link fence at Merchant's warehouse. It matched the parole file. The van's engine idled for a moment, then eased through. Mark Thompson stepped out. He wore a ball cap and a windbreaker. He lifted 2 grocery bags from the passenger side. Through the plastic, you could see candy and small box toys. He carried them to a side door and went inside. The undercover agent sat on a crate 15 feet away in view of 2 cameras and acted absorbed in his game. After 40 seconds, Thompson came back out and reached for a video camera on a tripod from the van. He scanned the lot quickly and turned back to the door. That was the moment. Agents moved in before he could return to the building. 3 vehicles blocked the van's nose and tail. A 4th pinned the side. 2 agents approached from the door to keep him from retreating inside. Commands were short and clear. He set the tripod down, raised his hands, and was cuffed without a struggle. The agent by the door pulled the undercover back and out of view in case there were other eyes. They searched the van on site. In a plastic tote under a blanket, they found zip ties, a roll of duct tape, and a brown glass bottle marked from a chemical supply with a paper label for chloroform. There were cotton pads and a sealed bag next to it. In the glove compartment was a spiral notebook with tabs. Inside, there was a list of 5 children from our neighborhood. Each page had a name, a photo printed from a phone, a home address, a school, and schedule notes. Ethan's page was the thickest with taped slips. There were lines about his fear of thunderstorms, noted next to dates he had cried during a summer storm, and about his love of dinosaurs, with a magazine clipping of a T-Rex toy circled. Thompson had written what kinds of rewards worked, what words to use, and which corners had no cameras. 3 other pages had similar notes but fewer details. The last page had Lily's name in a column of pressure points, and a line that said, "Use dog if needed." The agents photographed everything. They secured the bottle and sealed the van. I stayed on my route as instructed until they told me to drive to the station. In the weeks after, Thompson pleaded guilty to attempted kidnapping and conspiracy. The prosecutor said the evidence in the van, the letters, and the surveillance made the case strong. The judge gave him 25 years in federal prison. During the wider investigation, the FBI pulled more images off his devices. He had been photographing children at 3 different schools from outside the fences and from parked cars, logging times and faces. Detectives visited families. 2 other families had received invitations like ours and had not reported them. They had thrown them away, thinking it was a prank. The teams also found that Thompson had used his job as a cable installer to learn about houses. He had notes about which homes had children based on room decor seen during service calls, where routers sat by windows, which streets had easy escape routes, and when parents worked late shifts. He had map pins on a wall, color-coded for opportunity. After charges were filed and his guilty plea entered, they moved us into temporary witness protection. Agents changed our phones, forwarded our mail, and put us in a rented place 2 counties over while we waited on paperwork. When it was clear there were no other active accomplices, we started over in a different state. Ethan started therapy to deal with what he had learned, not the dramatic parts from TV, but the slow facts. A man had watched him and planned. We kept routines simple. I checked our new mailbox every day and still do. I look for thick white envelopes with no postmark. I still watch the door gap in the morning. The detective told us most parents never catch these approaches in time. We were lucky I opened that mail first, lucky the threat was clear enough to push the right switches, and lucky the agents believed us and moved immediately. Not every family gets those 3 pieces of luck. I was 26 when this happened, living in East Portland with my 5-year-old son, Ethan. That Sunday in March started like any other. We hit the Safeway for bread, milk, and a few basics, plus a pack of animal cookies Ethan grabbed with both hands like treasure. The sky was flat gray, wet, but not quite raining. I drove the short way home with the radio off so I could hear him naming the animals on the box. Our rented 2-story place sits behind a narrow strip of grass and a short walk, with the parking lot tucked in the back by the alley. The lot has 6 spaces, cracked asphalt with weeds in the seams, and an oil rainbow under the neighbor's Subaru. The dumpsters sit in a corner by a leaning chain-link fence. That's where I noticed a young guy in a gray jacket. He looked maybe 19. Thin, pale jaw. Hands near his face like he was smoking or staring down at a phone. When I started backing into my usual spot, he peeled off toward the main road, slow, hood up. I figured he was waiting for someone or killing time. I cut the wheel, lined up, and killed the engine. Ethan kept up a steady stream about the cookies while I set the brake. I told him to hold the bag with both arms and not drop the eggs. We went in through the side entrance like always. There's a wooden gate with a sticky latch, 3 concrete steps, and a side door that opens straight into the kitchen. The door frame is scuffed from groceries and scooters. I balanced 2 heavy paper bags on my forearms and nudged the door with my hip. The house smelled like old coffee and laundry soap. I kicked the door shut and set the bags on the counter. We did the usual. Milk to the top shelf of the fridge, apples in the crisper, pasta in the narrow cabinet that always hangs crooked. Ethan tried for the cookie box. I shook my head and pointed to the clock. He parked on the rug with his toy fire truck and pushed it back and forth. Siren sounds whispered under his breath. From the kitchen window over the sink, I could see the back lot through the blinds. A plastic bag chased itself in a corner, tapping the fence when the breeze shifted. I wiped the counter and checked the back door. The bolt was firm, chain hanging loose. I slid it up and down once and left it down. I'm not a nervous person, but I like habit. The living room has a big front window that looks out to the short strip of grass and the sidewalk. Our block is usually quiet on Sundays, a bus every half hour. I set the receipt by the fruit bowl and smoothed it flat. Ethan asked for juice. I poured half a cup and told him not to spill on his socks. About 10 minutes after we got in, the doorbell rang. It's one of those cheap single chimes that sounds like a fork hitting a glass. I put the juice down and walked to the door. Through the peephole, I saw the same guy from the parking lot. Up close, I could see a neck tattoo peeking above his collar. The line work was dark and tight, tucked under the gray fabric. He was smiling, but it didn't reach anything else. He held his shoulders square to the door like he was taking a photo. I slid the chain on and opened the door as far as the brass would let it. Cold air cut across my toes. The guy's eyes stayed fixed on me like he was counting inches. A second young man stood farther back on the sidewalk, just outside the wet patch under the awning. Hands in his pockets, head down, sneakers dirty at the toes. He didn't come closer. He just shifted his weight from heel to heel like he was bored or waiting to be told what to do. Ethan padded over and peeked around my leg. The first guy's eyes moved and locked on him for a long moment. It wasn't quick. His smile didn't change, but the stare did. I moved my knee and blocked more of the gap without making a big deal of it. The chain creaked a little. I could smell damp fabric and stale smoke, that mix you get from stop-and-go rain. A bus hissed down the street, and then the block went quiet again. The guy finally spoke. His voice was casual and light like we were neighbors. "Marcus live here?" That was it. No hello, no explanation. The second guy kept his eyes on the curb. I said, "No. Maybe try next door." I kept my hand on the door edge and didn't move anything else. Ethan pressed his fingers into my calf. The first guy kept the smile for another beat, like he wanted to see if I'd offer more. He glanced up at the number on our trim, then back at me through the small opening. The tattoo sat still above his collar, black lines peeking like a note tucked under paper. He didn't look past me into the house. He didn't look at the shoes by the mat or the coat hooks. He went back to Ethan for half a second, then to my face again. He stepped back one pace. The second guy turned without a word. I let the chain hold and closed the door that small extra inch until the brass came tight. I stayed there, the peephole centered on them. The first guy wiped his palm against his jacket front like he'd touched something wet. The other one rolled his shoulders inside his hoodie. Neither said anything, and neither of them glanced at the neighbor's porch, mailbox, or door. They turned and walked down the sidewalk, heads low against the mist, and they left without even glancing at the neighbor's house. Dave showed up about 30 minutes later for our planned lunch. He texted from the corner, and then his Harley rolled up, the engine heavy and smooth. He parked at the curb just past our front patch of grass, right along the same stretch of sidewalk where that guy had stood. The chrome was clean, seat black with a small tear near the seam. Dave kept his helmet hooked on the bar and walked up with the visor dangling. He stomped his boots on the mat and pulled off his gloves, laughing about the wet road, asking if I had anything besides turkey. Ethan ran circles around his legs and asked if the bike could make fire. We were inside maybe 5 minutes. Dave put his keys and wallet on the counter, asked for water, and went to plug his phone into the charger he thought he left from last time. He patted all his pockets, frowned, and said he must have left the charger under his seat. He stepped back outside, still talking about a food truck he wanted to try. I wiped Ethan's hands and told him to sit at the table. I heard Dave's boots hit the front steps again, then stop. Silence sat there like a dropped plate. The door pushed open, and he said my name once, flat. The space at the curb was empty. No kickstand oil dot, no wheel mark, just the wet rectangle where the bike had blocked the mist. Dave walked out into the street, looked both directions like he would see it idling at the stop sign. He looked down the block at the bus stop. A woman with a stroller crossed, and he asked her if she saw a motorcycle. She shook her head without slowing. He checked up and down like he was rewinding the last 5 minutes. The helmet hook swung empty on the handlebar, now missing. The chain he sometimes ran through the back wheel was in his backpack, not on the bike. He started to pace, hands open, then closed, then open again. He kept repeating the street name and the time. I pulled my phone and dialed 911. The operator's voice was calm. I gave our address, the make and model, the plate numbers off the insurance card Dave handed me with fingers that shook, once then went still. I said the bike had been there less than 5 minutes ago. I said we were on a quiet residential street. I said I had 2 young men at my door earlier, asking for the wrong person, and I gave quick descriptions while Dave scanned the side streets. The operator asked if there were cameras nearby. I said not that I knew of. She took the report and said an officer would come by and a detective would follow up. She gave a case number. Dave's mouth thinned when he heard the phrasing about follow-up. He walked the block twice. He looked for fresh scratches on the curb, for scuffs on the wet sidewalk. He checked the alley and the back lot. The dumpsters were shut. A bottle cap lay in a puddle by the fence. No bike. He came back in and stood by the window, arms locked across his chest like he was keeping heat in. I made sandwiches because that's what we planned, and it gave me something to place on plates. Ethan ate chips and asked where the loud bike went. Dave didn't sit. He kept going back to the door, looking out, then checking his phone, then back to the door. A patrol car rolled by an hour later and slowed without stopping. I called the non-emergency number and repeated everything. Another operator said a detective would be assigned and to keep my phone on. Dave finally took a chair and leaned forward so hard the legs squealed. We spent the afternoon like that. Every bus sound made both of us stand. He scrolled photos of the bike, zoomed in on the plate, the tiny sticker in the corner. He called his insurance. He texted friends. He made a list of pawn shops and garages even though he knew the odds. When evening settled, he insisted on checking every lock twice. He slid the deadbolt and tugged once, then again. He checked the chain on the side door. He checked the back door bolt. He walked the baseboards to see if windows were latched. He turned on the porch light and stepped into the night air like he could hear the bike from far off. He left after dark in a rideshare, helmet in his lap, jaw tight. I watched the curb until the taillights faded. I put Ethan to bed, then walked the house again. I moved the kitchen chair 2 inches so it didn't block the side door, then moved it back. The space where the bike had been stayed empty like a missing tooth. I slept with the hallway light on even though it made the house look strange. 3 days later, my phone rang while I was rinsing a pan. The number was local but not saved. I answered, and a man introduced himself as Detective Harrison. He confirmed my name and address and asked if I was the one who reported a stolen Harley on Sunday. I said yes. He asked if I could talk a minute. The water ran over my fingers and I shut it off and dried my hands on a dish towel. He said they found the bike early that morning in a garage off SE 39th, inside a rented unit with 2 other stripped frames. They had 2 suspects in custody. He asked me to listen and tell him if what he was going to say matched anything I'd told the operator. He named the general descriptions: early 20s, one with a neck tattoo, the other quieter, both seen near my place before the theft. I said yes. He asked if anyone else had come by that day. I said my friend Dave, and that he was the owner of the bike. Then Harrison told me what happened after the theft. They drove the Harley to the Hawthorne district and left it behind a grocery store. The two of them waited near the carts, then followed a couple to their car. They attacked the husband with a bat near the rear bumper. The first swing hit his forearm when he tried to block. Another hit his ribs. The wife screamed, and the second guy grabbed her purse. She tried to hold on, and they shoved her into the car door. Her arm broke against the frame. The keys hit the ground, and the first guy stomped them into the slush, then grabbed the wallet, watch, and phone. They took the couple's car and left the Harley behind the store. Harrison's voice stayed level, but he slowed down for the injuries. The husband was in the hospital, stable. The wife had a cast and stitches. They were alive. He said it wasn't random. It was part of a gang initiation. New members had to pull off a job and bring in proof. The stolen bike, the attack, the stolen car, it all fit the pattern. He said, "They talked in interrogation." He paused. "They said they went to your door first." I didn't say anything. He kept going. During interrogation, they admitted they had planned to rob me. They had watched me park, watched us go inside. They wanted a quick grab, cash, maybe electronics, car keys. They had a time frame. Then they saw Ethan. The one with the tattoo said out loud, "There's a kid. Not worth it." They stepped back to the sidewalk and decided to change the target. They still wanted something fast to show. The bike was sitting right there. It was easier to roll, no helmet, no chain. They took it and shifted to another location where they thought people would be distracted coming out of stores. I asked him to repeat that last part, and he did, word for word. He said he would need Dave to sign some paperwork, and they would coordinate with his insurance. He warned me that recovered vehicles rarely come back the same. The next weeks moved in a line of calls and forms. The guys were charged with aggravated robbery and other counts. Court dates came and went. I took time off work to answer the detectives' calls. Dave went to the yard where they held the recovered bikes. His wasn't rideable. The ignition was torn out, the wiring pulled like guts, the mirrors gone, the seat cut, parts already swapped onto other frames. He stood next to it for a photo for the file, and then walked away. He didn't say much after that. The case ended with both of them getting 6 years for aggravated robbery. The judge read the terms. The news wrote a short column online. I moved 2 months later. The new place was across town in a smaller building with a gate that actually shut. I couldn't shake the feeling every time I parked, so I changed the routine. I circled the block when I felt watched. I parked closer to lights. I kept my keys in my hand from car to door. I had cameras installed at the top of the stairs and over the parking area, simple ones with an app that pinged my phone when someone stepped into the frame. I measured the angle so it covered the walkway and the doorbell at the same time. Dave didn't get the bike back in one piece. The insurance paid out, minus what felt like too much. The shop took what was left for parts and scrap. He bought a used truck and said he'd ride again someday, but not now. He came over a few times after I moved and checked my locks like before, more out of habit than fear. He kept his voice low when he talked about the couple from Hawthorne, like speaking normal volume would make it worse. He carried his keys between 2 fingers when we walked to his truck. Sometimes I think about the moment the guy stared at my son through the narrow gap. I play it as a still frame, the neck tattoo above the collar, the set of his shoulders, the eyes flicking to Ethan for that extra second. I think about what stopped them. I wonder if it was really seeing a kid that made them back off, or if Dave showing up changed their timeline by just enough minutes. I don't dwell on it, but I keep the pieces where I can reach them. When Ethan turned 7, I enrolled him in a kids' martial arts class. Not because I think he can fight off grown men, but because routine matters, awareness matters, moving your body when your brain freezes matters. He learned to keep space, to use his voice, to look for exits. I showed him the cameras on my phone and how the alerts pop up when someone walks near our door. We practiced unlocking and locking, not as a game, just as steps. He rolled his eyes sometimes, but he did them. You never know who is watching your routine, memorizing when you are alone, noting how you hold the door and what you set down first. The detective said I was lucky. I nodded and thanked him and did all the paperwork. But luck feels like a thin wall when you realize how close you came. Last spring, I was looking for a used car. I wanted something boring and reliable for commuting. I spent nights scrolling listings, comparing prices, reading VIN reports. One ad stuck out. A 2015 Honda Accord, clean photos, decent miles, 2 owners, no accidents. The seller's name was Tony. Over text, he looked normal. He answered fast. He sent extra pictures of the engine, tires, dashboard. He proposed a meeting at a public place. We set it for 7 p.m. at a mall in suburban Phoenix. That evening, the parking lot felt safe. The sun was low. Families pushed strollers. A security truck rolled by every few minutes. The Accord was parked under a light near the food court entrance. Silver paint, no visible dents. Tony stood beside it with a manila folder. He was maybe 40. Neat beard, short hair, polo shirt tucked into jeans, sneakers. He waved, said my name, and shook my hand like this was a regular sale. He had the paperwork ready. Title copy, service receipts, emissions paper. He showed his license. I matched the VIN at the windshield and door. The engine bay looked clean, belts tight, no leaks. Oil level amber, not burnt. Coolant pink and full. The tires had even wear and good tread. I checked the trunk for the spare and jack. The interior was tidy, no strong smell. The radio and lights worked. The backup camera came on. When I asked for a test drive, he nodded. He said he would show me the car's features first, then we could switch seats after a few blocks. That sounded fine. I didn't see a problem with him starting. It was still light. There were people around. We got in. I buckled up. He adjusted the seat and mirrors, turned the key, and the 4 cylinders settled into a steady idle. The air conditioning clicked on and blew cold. He pulled out smooth. We looped the rows between stores while he talked about maintenance. He said the transmission fluid had been changed the past winter. He said the brakes were new. He pointed to the Bluetooth button. He showed the cruise control stalk. He braked gently to let a cart boy pass, and then signaled toward the exit by the cinema. I kept my eyes on the speed, the temp gauge, the steering response. Everything felt normal. 5 minutes into the drive, I noticed we weren't angling toward the residential streets like we'd discussed. Instead, he merged onto the highway ramp. He said the engine performed better at speed, that it would show how smooth it ran. I didn't like leaving the area, but I figured one exit and back would be fine. I told him to take the next ramp. He nodded without looking at me and set the cruise at 65. The suburbs dropped away behind us. Streetlights thinned out. Billboards replaced storefronts. I said again we should exit. He said, just a bit further, and tapped the cruise button like that was the point. The minutes stretched. 10 became 15, then 20. I stopped making small talk. I asked more direct. Where are we turning? He said we'd loop back after he showed me how steady the car stayed at 70. Then he stopped answering at all. I checked my phone map in my lap. The blue dot was sliding west. Signal was weak, but there. The highway shoulder flashed with broken retread and dried brush. The dash clock rolled past 7:30. The fuel gauge sat at half. I put my backpack by my feet and kept the door handle within reach. I repeated myself, shorter now. Next exit. He kept his eyes far down the lane, hands at 10 and 2, jaw tight. The cruise held us pinned. The engine hummed. He drifted a little within the lane and corrected late. The sun sank, and the windshield glare turned red. A semi rolled by and pushed a shutter through the cabin. I watched his right foot. It stayed flat on the floor mat, nowhere near the brake. I said I was done with the test and wanted to drive. He didn't respond. The only sound was the fan and the tires. He took an exit without warning. I felt the seatbelt tug. Then we were off the highway, not toward town, but onto a long frontage road with no buildings. A faded sign pointed to a county route I didn't know. He passed it and kept going. The pavement ended after a bend. The Accord rolled onto dirt, and the wheel chattered over washboard ruts. Headlights lit up sand, creosote, and the big dark shapes of saguaros. The city glow was gone. We kept going. The road narrowed and dipped. Rocks pinged the undercarriage. The air smelled like dust and hot rubber. The temperature outside dropped with the sun, and the vents fogged a little at the corners. I raised my phone and saw the bars die one by one until the top read, "No service." I lowered it and put both hands on my knees to stop the shake. I told him to turn around. He said nothing. His knuckles were white. A few minutes later, we hit a fork where the dirt turned to twin tracks. No signs, no fences, just empty desert and a long strip of twilight. He slowed but didn't stop. I saw shoe prints and tire marks crossing the hardpan. The only sounds were the engine and a faint hiss of wind over the mirrors. I was done being polite. I needed pavement and people and lights. I shifted forward in the seat, set my feet, and spoke from the diaphragm. Sand hissed under the tires as the car nosed deeper into the ruts. The seatbelt locked when we jolted through a dip. I put my thumb on the hazard switch and kept my other hand open, fingers flat on the door panel, ready to brace. I demanded he stop the car immediately. He didn't stop. He stared past the hood, shoulders stiff, and let the car crawl deeper between the mesquite and the tall shadows. The dirt track pinched until the sage scraped both sides. The washboard rattle turned to a slow crunch. Then I saw it ahead in the beams. A black pickup pulled at an angle across the turn. 3 men beside it, all dark clothes, hats low. They stood like they'd been waiting. Tony eased off the gas and rolled us to them. One raised his arm and waved us forward. The car idled, nose pointed at their grill. Tony finally spoke. He didn't look at me. He said to hand over my purse and phone, said it would be quick if I cooperated. His voice was flat, like reading instructions. I had the phone in my lap, purse at my feet. The men by the truck spread out a little. One of them had a flashlight and pointed the beam at the windshield. It washed our faces in white. I didn't hand anything over. I wrapped my left hand around the door handle, thumb on the lock. I watched Tony's foot still flat and the car barely moving, just a slow roll. I cracked the door on the next bump. The dome light didn't come on. I pushed the door with my hip and threw myself out while the car was still moving. My shoulder hit first, then my knee, and grit bit into my palms. Air left my chest. I rolled and scrambled up before I thought about pain. I ran straight into the brush. Dry branches whipped my legs. Thorns grabbed my pants. The ground was uneven and sloped. Behind me, a door slammed hard, then another, then another. Voices shouted. Someone yelled, "There!" The engine note of the Accord rose, then cut. Boots hit dirt. I didn't look back. I aimed for the darkest gap and pushed through. The desert closed in. Low, prickly pear and tall ocotillo made a maze. Every step scratched. Cholla segments broke and stuck. I kept my hands in front of my face and moved fast, head down, breathing short. I tried to make a line, but I had to zigzag around spines and washouts. I cleared a low rise and saw a light far off to the left, a small amber square against the blue dusk. It looked like a porch. I changed direction toward it. Footsteps thudded and slid behind me. They were close, then a little farther. My shoes filled with sand. I nearly went down when a rock rolled under me, but I caught a bush and kept moving. The light got bigger. I saw the shape of a building, then a second one, and a windmill silhouette. A fence line ran between me and the structures. Barbed wire stretched between old posts. My legs were bleeding in streaks. I didn't stop to check anything. At the fence, the wire hummed in the wind. I grabbed a post and tried to climb. The barbs bit into my jeans. I put my knee on a lower strand, pressed down, and swung a leg over. The denim snagged and tore. I pushed through anyway, careful with my hands. A barb raked my calf. I landed weird on the other side, but stayed up and kept going. The shouts were closer at the fence, then they faded a little when they hit the wire and had to decide where to cross. Gravel crunched under my shoes as I reached a dirt driveway. A dog barked from a pen. Security lights popped on near the barn and flooded the yard with dull light. I waved both arms and yelled for help until my throat burned. An older man stepped out onto the porch of the ranch house with a shotgun in one hand. He held it down, not pointed, and scanned the yard. I stopped at the edge of the porch, hands up, words coming out rough. He looked me up and down, and then passed me to the darkness. The truck engine back on the dirt road roared to life like someone stomped the throttle. Headlights swung. Dust rose in the beams. The rancher told me to stay by the steps. He kept his eyes toward the noise and reached back to push open the screen door with his elbow. He called the sheriff while I stood under the porch light. His wife came out with a towel and a bottle of water. She guided me to the top step. She didn't waste time on questions. She looked at the cuts and wiped grit off my palms and shins, quick and steady. The water tasted like metal and chlorine, and I drank it in 3 long pulls. She checked for deeper wounds and pulled a few cactus spines with tweezers from a little kit. The rancher watched the road. The black pickup's lights stayed where the dirt track met the main lane. The engine idled and then faded, like they turned away. The old man didn't chase. He kept the shotgun low and his phone in his other hand, kept the line open. He told dispatch our mile marker and added that there were multiple suspects. He gave the plate number when I said it out loud. I'd read it when the headlights hit the truck and locked it in my head with a simple rhythm. I did the same with the Honda's plate before I jumped, repeating it silently as I ran. We waited. The dog settled. The wife taped gauze over a deeper scrape on my knee and pressed it down firm. She asked if I was allergic to anything. I shook my head. The porch light hummed and drew bugs. In the distance, tires spun on gravel, and then quiet. The desert went still again except for a thin wind moving the dry weeds. Deputies arrived in under 20 minutes. 2 SUVs, light bars off, dust rolling behind. They parked between the house and the road and approached slow. The rancher set the shotgun on a chair and raised an open hand. The deputies separated us by a few feet to get quick statements. They checked the fence line with flashlights and looked for tracks. One deputy went down the driveway with his spotlight sweeping the brush and the dirt. The other took my account from start to finish, while I kept the details short and straight. He asked the exact location where the Accord left the pavement, the direction of travel, and any landmarks. I pointed to where I'd seen the windmill and the big saguaro with a broken arm. They radioed in the plate numbers. The reply came back that both vehicles were stolen. The tone on the radio didn't change. The deputy wrote and underlined. He asked about the ad, the texts, the time we met. I showed the messages and the photos Tony sent. He took pictures of my phone screen with his body cam and asked me to forward everything later to a case email. He photographed my torn jeans and the cactus spines the wife had lined up on a napkin after she pulled them. They searched the track for a while but didn't push deep in the dark. The rancher said he'd seen unfamiliar dust trails earlier in the week out there. The deputy nodded and marked the spot on a map page. He asked if I needed EMS. I said I was okay to clean up at home. He suggested a tetanus shot if mine was old. He told me not to erase anything and to answer a call from a detective in the morning. They took a quick look at the blacktop head and tail, then circled back to the highway. The sheriff's office ran the plates I'd memorized and confirmed both were hot. In the morning, a detective called and said they had seen similar reports. It turned out Tony's crew had been running the same setup for months. They posted clean car ads, met buyers in safe places to lower guards, then steered them to quiet spots and took what they could. Sometimes they just robbed. Sometimes they took the whole car if the buyer drove alone. They used stolen plates and burner phones, changed the names every week, and kept to wide areas with desert access. They caught them the next day. The deputies posted a fake interest text and agreed to meet at a different mall. Plainclothes waited in unmarked trucks. The black pickup showed with 3 men. The Accord didn't. They tried the same move on a decoy. When they turned toward the highway, marked units boxed them in and pulled them at the ramp. Nobody ran. They all went down face down on the asphalt, wrists tied with flex cuffs. In their truck, they found 2 purses, 3 phones, a cheap pistol, and a stack of new prepaid SIM cards. Tony got 15 years. The other 2 from the pickup got 10 each. Another man connected to the Honda was arrested later and took a plea. 2 previous victims came forward after seeing the news, one from a grocery lot and one from a park and ride. Neither had reported because they felt stupid for going along with the drive. The rancher testified at the trial. He said I was lucky I ran toward his property instead of deeper into the desert. After the verdict, I walked to my car with my keys in my fist and looked over both shoulders like it was a new habit. I buy cars only from dealerships now, never alone, never without telling someone exactly where I'm going. That 20-minute drive into darkness taught me that predators don't always hide. Sometimes they advertise. Our biology teacher rolled the permission slips into a rubber band and said we would meet under the big blue whale at 9 a.m. The bus ride from school to the Natural History Museum in Denver took 40 minutes. 25 of us, 2 teachers, backpacks with snacks, pencils, and the assignment sheet about sketching and labeling fossils. I sat by the window with Zoe. We joked about how the bus smelled like dry erase markers and chips. It felt like a normal field trip. We were 16. We just wanted a day out of class. Inside, the air felt cool and dry. The paleontology wing was quiet except for shoes on tile and the soft hum of the air systems. Skeletons hung over us with metal supports that looked like ribs of a ship. We stood under a T-Rex skull and tried to draw the jaw hinge. Zoe kept erasing. I noticed a man in jeans and a faded Broncos cap reading a plaque near the Triceratops. He looked like he was about 40. He didn't wear a visitor sticker or a school badge. That wasn't strange. It was a public place. He had a paper map and kept it folded in his hand. We moved to the gems exhibit. The hallway narrowed and the lighting went dim so the stones could glow. Kids pressed fingerprints into the glass while alarms beeped softly if they leaned on the rails. I saw his cap again in the reflection of a case. He wasn't close. He stood where he could see the path ahead. He had no phone out. He just waited until we left the room and then drifted after us, acting like he was still looking. I told myself it was nothing. People walk in the same order all the time. In the ocean life section, a fiberglass shark hung over a fake reef. There were buttons you could press to hear whale calls. We stopped by the touch table with shells and a dried starfish in a tray. I checked the doorway. The man came in slow, then stood near a column and leaned against it. He watched the line we formed for the touch table and then stepped aside when our teacher looked over. He pretended to read the diagram about currents. He never got close enough to bump anyone. Always a few yards back. We crossed into a wide corridor with benches. A school from another district went by in matching orange shirts. Our group paused to count heads. The man stayed to the side, eyes on us while fiddling with his ticket stub. When we started walking again, he slipped into motion too. His steps matched ours. I kept thinking about how he never looked at the big displays, only at bodies, the flow of people. I didn't say anything to Zoe then. I watched him in the shiny floor instead. We reached a quieter gallery with a long glass rail where you could look down into the fossil prep lab. A guy in a white coat chipped rock off a bone with a tiny tool. We were supposed to sketch what we saw and note 2 facts from the signs. Zoe found a spot near the end of the rail. I sat to her left. We spread our notebooks and started on the assignment. Pencils made a scratching sound. The man in the cap stood by an emergency exit door with a red bar. He wasn't watching the lab. Zoe put her pencil down. She followed my eyes. His cap tilted our way. He didn't even fake a glance at the sign. He watched our hands move, our bags at our feet, the way we leaned when we erased. I could see the door's push bar in his shadow, a hard line across his chest. He didn't blink much. He didn't talk to anyone. 2 other visitors came through and he shifted just enough to let them pass, then settled again with the door behind him. We closed our notebooks and moved on, slow at first, like we were just done with a sketch. We joined a stream of people heading toward the butterfly pavilion. The hallway warmed up as we got closer. There was a sign about the humidity and a staff member checking bags for food. The man kept far enough back that if I stopped, he would have to stop too. And he did. Inside, the air was damp and sweet. Leaves brushed our shoulders. Butterflies landed on mesh and on the wet stones near the little pond. We looped the path once. He didn't look at a single butterfly. He stood on the exit side of the loop and watched the path we had to take to leave. We went through the double doors and into the cooler hall, then followed signs toward the planetarium. A group ahead of us laughed too loud, and it echoed. In the lobby, the ticket scanner beeped. Our teacher counted us through. We sat in the middle rows, Zoe on my right this time. The room went dark, and the ceiling shifted to night sky. Voices quieted. I tried to watch the show. Out of habit, I looked back once. He had picked a seat 3 rows behind and 2 seats over. When the narrator talked about Orion, the light from the star map lit his face. He was not looking up. He looked at us. I faced forward. I thought about switching seats with Zoe, but that would just move the line he watched, not break it. The show ended. The announcer warned everyone to stand slowly. Shoes scuffed. We waited our turn and filed out with other groups, aiming for the bright hall. I didn't look back again there. The lobby light made everyone look washed out, bleached. We crossed to where our class gathered near the map kiosk. We slid in with 3 kids from our class and one of the teachers, Mr. Julian, who was holding a clipboard. I could feel the air move as big groups passed. We stayed near the teacher, which felt practical. It made it easier to hear where to go next. The man didn't join any line. He took up a spot near a brochure stand and pretended to read a flyer. He kept his distance. He still had a clear view of our cluster of backpacks and lanyards. Our class moved together into the Native American section. It was cooler again, and the light was even, like morning. Glass cases held woven baskets, stone tools, beadwork on cloth, pairs of moccasins under slanted light. I looked for our reflection and found his in the glass near a set of tools. He stopped at a pillar with a metal base, one hand in his pocket, the other holding that folded map. He watched our group drift from case to case, always adjusting to keep the line of sight clean. We stepped past a model of a small lodge with a split log roof. Our teacher spoke quietly about the materials used and pointed at a photo. Zoe and I kept near the front of our group. In the reflection, the man lifted his chin a little as if keeping count. He moved when we moved. He didn't touch the railings or look at the text. He didn't check a watch. He waited for corridors to open, and then he took them. We entered the wildlife dioramas. The rooms were darker again, with big painted backdrops and glass walls. A mountain scene with a frozen stream ran the length of one wall. Elk posed in mid-step on fake snow. People took pictures with their phones facing down to stop the glare. Our group stayed together now. It wasn't a plan we said out loud. We just didn't break off. In the reflection of the glass, he always placed himself at an angle where he could see us turn. When someone new crossed his path, he waited, then adjusted. We kept moving. He maintained the same gap. He didn't push, and he didn't fall back. He matched our pace through the Native American section, then along the wildlife dioramas, everywhere we went. Lunch break came at noon. We followed the signs to a small courtyard with metal tables and a low fence that looked out toward the street. The ground was pale concrete. There were 3 trees and square grates. We sat at a table near the middle. I unwrapped a ham sandwich. Zoe had carrot sticks and a granola bar. Other students spread out but stayed in the same area. Mr. Davidson stood by the doors with his hands on his hips, watching both the courtyard and the lobby inside through the glass. I felt the temperature change on my skin after the cold galleries. The sun bounced off the windows of the museum. People walked past on the sidewalk outside the fence. A delivery truck stopped and idled. I saw the faded Broncos cap near the far side of the fence. He stood at the perimeter where the bars cast sharp shadows. He wasn't pretending anymore. He looked at our table and then along the line of tables, like he was reading a menu. He lifted his phone once, slow, like a tourist, but the lens pointed toward us, not the building. He lowered it, then lifted it again. I put my sandwich back in the bag. Zoe did the same. We stood up without saying anything and carried our food inside. The airlock doors made a soft hiss. Mr. Davidson saw our faces and asked where we were going next. We told him about the man. We pointed through the glass at the fence. The cap and the jeans and the way he held the phone like he wanted a clear shot. Mr. Davidson narrowed his eyes and nodded once. He walked out at a steady pace, not fast, but direct. The man turned as Mr. Davidson got within 10 feet. He didn't argue. He didn't look confused. He just pivoted and walked along the fence line toward the parking garage entrance. He didn't run, but he moved like someone who had a route planned. He disappeared into the shadow under the concrete levels. Mr. Davidson followed to the sidewalk, looked down the ramp, and then came back inside. He told us to stay with the group. He stayed close to our class for the rest of the visit. He checked the corners before we turned. He counted us more often. We finished the remaining exhibits on our list. The rooms felt louder even when they were quiet. We stayed near the teachers. Every time a door opened, we looked up. We did not see the cap again inside. The schedule said departure at 2 p.m. We gathered in the main hall under the blue whale and lined up by homeroom. Mr. Julian read names. Mr. Davidson watched the door that led to the parking lot. I checked my bag for my sketch and the assignment sheet and made sure my phone had battery. We went out as a group. The parking lot was rows of cars under a high ceiling, with pillars marked with big letters. Our bus was parked near a pillar with D painted on it. Sunlight cut in from the open sides and made strips on the asphalt. The gray sedan stood 2 rows over, backed into a space, facing our bus at an angle. The man in the faded cap was next to the driver door. He had his phone out again. He pointed it at the front of our bus, then at the side where the school name was painted. He held a small notebook in his other hand and wrote in it while glancing back up. His shoulders were relaxed. He didn't care if we saw. A parent chaperone from another class noticed first. She started walking toward him with her palm up, like she wanted to ask a question. The man saw her and slid into the driver's seat of the sedan. He closed the door and put both hands on the wheel, but he did not turn on the engine. He just sat there. His head turned a little to keep the bus in view. Mr. Davidson pulled out his phone and called museum security. He spoke in short, clear phrases and gave the location by the pillar letter. He told us to board. We filed up the steps and took our seats. I took the 3rd row on the right with Zoe. I watched through the window. 2 security guards in dark uniforms walked together from the entrance, heads up, radios at their shoulders. They crossed 1 row, then another. The man in the sedan turned his key only when the guards were close enough to raise a hand. The engine started. He backed out slow, then pulled forward, and by the time the guards reached the empty space, the car turned down the ramp and disappeared. One guard spoke into his radio. The other looked at the bus, and then at the space where the sedan had been. The bus door closed. Mr. Julian walked the aisle once, then sat in front. Mr. Davidson stood for a second on the first step and told the driver something in a low voice. We pulled out into the street. The museum slid past the windows. At the light, I checked the mirror on the side of the bus, watching for a gray car. All I saw were bicycles and a city bus. Back at school, they had us stay in the cafeteria and wait for dismissal instead of walking around campus. Security met the teachers and wrote down notes. The next day, the school sent a letter home. It was in our email and printed on paper we got in homeroom. It said there was an incident at the museum involving a suspicious adult. It said staff intervened and security was notified. It said students should walk in pairs on future trips and report any concerns. For the next few weeks, there was a guard at the front door in the morning and after school. A police car parked near the exit at dismissal. The bus line had cones now. On field trips, we wore bright lanyards with the school name and the teacher's number. The changes were simple. They made the campus feel smaller. My parents asked me to tell the story again so they could get the timeline right. They called it in to the non-emergency line. A patrol officer came by on a Thursday evening and took a report at our kitchen table. He wrote the details down in a spiral notebook and then into a form on his laptop. He asked for the time, the make of the car, the clothes, the actions. He said without a crime they could not do much, but the report would be on file. He explained that surveillance footage might help if the museum caught the plate. He did not promise a result. For a while, nothing else happened. We had tests and projects. The weather shifted. We took a different trip to a small science center, and nothing looked strange there. I still watched people more. I noticed who stood at exits. I noticed who had empty hands in places where most people held a phone or a bag. I learned the faces of our usual security staff by name, just from their tags. 3 months later, on a Sunday night, Zoe's mom texted a link to my mom. It was a local news site with a photo from a press briefing. A man had been arrested for attempting to abduct a teenager from a different museum. Not Denver, but another city 2 hours away off the highway. The police said staff and another visitor had intervened in a parking lot when the man tried to push a girl toward a car. The article had a photo from a mugshot. The face was older than I expected, and the hair was shorter, not hidden by a cap. The jawline looked similar. The eyes looked wrong, or maybe the lighting made them look that way. We compared the angles on our phones. We didn't say yes or no. We couldn't be certain. We never found out if it was the same person. The school did not send an update. The museum didn't call us back. Life moved on in visible ways. I walked with friends to and from class. I checked over my shoulder before I unlocked my bike. When we went to the mall, I noted the nearest exit and the landscape of the parking lot, the gaps where a car could wait without being seen from the door. It wasn't fear like a movie scene. It was a list I kept in my head. Who appears more than once? Who stays at the edge of groups? Who watches too long? My parents got me pepper spray after that. We practiced how to use it on a tree in the backyard. I clipped it inside my bag where my hand could find it fast. I kept it for years. I still keep it now. I don't start fights. I don't accuse strangers without reason. I watch and I move and I don't ignore the pattern when I see it. Sometimes being careful is the only thing that stops a story from becoming a different kind of story. You can't always wait for proof that someone's dangerous. I was 11 when Mom and I left San Diego for Sacramento after the divorce. That June, she booked Riverside Family Camp near Lake Tahoe so we could forget the boxes and freeway noise. She drove with both hands tight on the wheel and said she wanted 2 quiet nights. At check-in, a teenager handed us a folded map and a key on a plastic tag. Our cabin had 2 bunks, a thin rug, and a window that stuck halfway. Mom set her phone to vibrate, kicked off her shoes, and said she needed a nap. I told her I'd stay close and left the door cracked so I could hear if she called. I walked the gravel loop past pine trunks and bear-proof cans. The lodge sat up the hill with rocking chairs and a bulletin board of canoe times. Farther back was the game room. Low roof, open door, a box fan rattling. Inside, the carpet had old neon shapes. An air hockey table sat under a flickering light. 2 pinball machines and a line of ancient arcade cabinets hugged the wall. Galaga's joystick leaned sideways. The room smelled like dust and lemon cleaner. That's where I met Tyler. He was about my age, skinny, sleeves pulled down over his hands. A small scab sat on his chin. He kept glancing at the door while he spun the puck on the table. He didn't smile. He just slid me a striker and we played. We tapped the puck back and forth because the blower was loud. He asked how long I'd be at camp. "Just the weekend," I said. He nodded but looked past me again. After a minute, he asked if I wanted to see his family's cabin. He said his parents were making hamburgers and had homemade ice cream. He watched my face like he needed an answer fast. I felt hungry but shook my head. I said I should check with my mom first because she was napping. I didn't want her to wake up and not know where I went. He rolled the puck in a circle and said okay without relaxing. He didn't drop it. He said the food would be gone soon and his parents wanted to meet other families. He said they had a PlayStation and lots of games. I had not made any friends in Sacramento yet. I missed my old street. I stared at the scuffed table edge and thought about going back to ask. Then he said they also had chocolate chip cookies fresh from the oven. That got me. I said okay. I'd go for a cookie and be back fast. Tyler set the striker down and said we should go now. We walked past the picnic tables. A horseshoe pit had only one stake. The main loop had new cabins with flower boxes and radios on low. Tyler led me off the loop onto a narrow path where asphalt broke into weeds. The sound of camp got thin. A woodpecker tapped once, then stopped. The sun felt higher already. We passed a maintenance shed with a chain on the doors and a staff-only sign. A wheelbarrow leaned there with a flat tire. Down the slope on our right, The river made a cold sound over rocks. Pine cones rolled under my shoes if I didn't look down. Tyler didn't check if I kept up. I kept telling myself it was fine. It was still camp and daylight. The back section looked older. The cabins were spread out and half in shade. Paint peeled off railings in long curls. Numbers on the doors were blurred stencils. A plastic chair sat upside down on one porch. I didn't hear radios here. I didn't smell grills. It was cooler, and the dust on the path was smooth like not many feet used it. Tyler kept his hands in his sleeves and pointed with his chin. He said theirs was at the end. We stepped over a low chain sagging between two posts. My shoe scraped it and made a dry clink. Tyler flinched and kept going. I looked back at the chain and then at the path to the busy part of camp. It already felt farther than it was. His family's cabin sat a little crooked on its blocks. The steps were uneven, and one board had a knothole in the middle. The rail's white paint had worn down to bare wood where hands would slide. A faded mat said, "Welco E," the M missing. The windows were covered with dark curtains. Two porch chairs had cracked seats. A small cooler sat by the door with the lid half closed. He told me to wait outside while he checked if his parents were ready. He said it like a rule. I stopped by the rail and put my hands in my pockets. I could hear water down the slope. Tyler tried the knob and it made a dry click. He knocked twice with his sleeve over his knuckles. He didn't call out. He stood still and angled his head like he was listening behind us. I looked back down the path. The chain hung quiet. The shed's tin roof glowed dull through the trees. A squirrel ran across the dust and vanished. I could hear my own breathing more than anything else. Inside the cabin there was a faint hum, maybe a mini fridge. No voices, no music, no smell of food. I shifted my weight and a board creaked. The fly bumped the window and went still. Tyler kept his hand on the knob, then wiped his palm on his sleeve. He leaned in, then waited like he was counting. The scab on his chin had a fresh crack. I took half a step back so I could watch the door and the path. Tyler turned the knob again, gentle this time, pressed his shoulder against the wood, and pushed. A minute later, the door opened. A large man filled the doorway, maybe 50, with a stained white tank top that stuck to his chest and a baseball cap pulled low. He smiled wide, showing yellowed teeth. He lifted his hand and made a small motion, like he was ushering me in. The room behind him was dark, curtains closed, a glow from a TV or something low and blue on the wall. I took one step toward the threshold because I still had the cookie in my head. A hand clamped my shoulder and yanked me back hard enough that my heel slid on the porch board. I spun and saw a man in a green camp polo and a radio on his belt. He put himself between me and the door in one smooth move. His chest was square to the older man, one arm still across me. "Kids need parent permission to visit other cabins," he said, flat and loud enough to carry. The big man's smile went dead. He tightened his jaw and looked past the camp guy at me. The brim of his cap threw a shadow over his eyes. He mumbled, "Just being neighborly," like it hurt to say it. Then he stepped back and slammed the door so hard the frame shook and dust puffed from the jam. The camp employee, his name tag said Roger, didn't take his eyes off the door. He moved me back from the steps with a light pressure on my shoulder. He kept his body between the door and me while he scanned the porch, the windows, the trees. I heard his radio crackle once at his hip. He didn't answer it. He turned me toward the path. We went straight back the way we came. Roger's hand stayed firm on my shoulder, not rough, just fixed there. My sneakers scuffed the dry chain again and made the same small clink. He didn't slow. The shed roof flashed through the pines, then the maintenance sign, then the open space where the path widened. I kept my head forward. I could feel the back of my neck hot where the porch had been. As soon as the new cabins came into view, with the radios and flower boxes, I could smell someone grilling again. The sounds of camp came back in layers. A laugh, a car door, a ball bouncing on asphalt. Roger kept walking at the same pace. We reached our cabin, and he knocked hard, 3 times, knuckles on the thin door. He waited and knocked again, louder. The door chain rattled. Mom opened with a crease on her cheek from the pillow and blinked at him and then at me. Roger explained fast and plain what he'd seen. He said my name once, said where he found me, said a man tried to bring me inside. Mom went pale and looked down at my shoes like she was checking for something. She grabbed her phone from the bunk and said she was calling the police. Roger lifted a hand and said he'd already called, that they were on the way. He told us to pack immediately. He said, "Now." Mom moved. She pulled our grocery bag out and swept toiletries and socks into it. She opened drawers, snatched our chargers, rolled the thin rug to get the flip-flops I pushed under the bed. She didn't ask questions yet. Roger stepped out onto the small porch and stood there, feet planted, radio facing outward. He kept his head moving, watching the path, the trees, the loop. His shoulders filled the doorway when I glanced at him. As I shoved my hoodie into my backpack, he spoke without turning around. He said the man in the cap had been flagged before for inappropriate behavior with minors. He said Tyler was his nephew, used to bring other kids over. He said he had noticed the pattern this season, the boy lingering in the game room, picking kids who were new, or alone, or bored. He said when he saw me with Tyler, he made a note to swing by the back section on his round. He didn't talk like a hero. He talked like someone listing tasks. I zipped my bag, and Mom zipped hers. She checked the bathroom once, grabbed the last toothbrush, and slammed the cabinet by accident. Roger stepped back inside just enough to look at us. "Car keys?" he asked. Mom held them up. He nodded. "We're going to the lot together," he said. He took my bag with one hand and kept his other on my shoulder when we stepped out. He looked up and down the road again, and then set us moving. His body angled so we were between him and the cabins. We went past the lodge, where a couple in camp shirts were talking and didn't notice us. Roger didn't stop to explain. We cut through the gravel to the parking area. He scanned the lines of cars and the tree line beyond. He pointed to our sedan with his chin and stood by while Mom hit the unlock. He stowed our bags in the back seat, shut the door, and opened the driver door for her. He crouched to my window after I got in. "Seatbelt," he said. I clicked it and kept my eyes ahead. We left within 15 minutes, before any siren or security truck showed up. Mom gripped the wheel hard. Her knuckles were light, and her ring kept tapping the steering wheel spoke when we hit bumps. She didn't talk at first. The camp entrance sign flashed by, and then the 2-lane highway opened, pines sliding by in a long green wall. She drove 3 hours straight back to Sacramento. Her hands shook sometimes when we slowed behind a truck, and then steadied when she passed. The next day, Roger called us. He said the man had been arrested. He said Tyler was with child services now. He didn't sound surprised. He told us there had been other complaints from previous camps, other close calls where a staff member or a parent had arrived at the right time. He said our leaving fast was the right call. He didn't use any scary words. He just said facts, and then asked if we were okay, and if Mom needed contact info for the detective. Mom enrolled me in martial arts the next week, first class on a Tuesday after school. She sat in a folding chair with a clipboard while I tried to copy the instructor's stance. She also bought me a phone with GPS tracking and set it up at the kitchen table with a glass of water and the instructions spread out. She said I had to text when I got somewhere and when I left. I said okay, and put the phone in my pocket and got used to the wait. I thought about the doorway a lot that summer. The thin porch board with the knothole, the dark inside, the cold blue TV light on the man's tank top. The way his face dropped when Roger spoke. The way the door hit the jamb and dust popped into the air. I pictured a plate of cookies that wasn't there. A console that probably wasn't plugged in. I pictured the chain across the path and how light it sounded when my shoe hit it. I walked different routes at school that fall just to practice noticing exits and people. Now I'm 24, and I know exactly what he saved me from. I don't dress it up. I don't tell it for shock. I tell it because it was an ordinary moment that turned, and because the trick wasn't complicated. It was food and games, and a kid my age who looked tired and kept his sleeves over his hands. That was enough. Some invitations look innocent because predators know how to make them appealing to lonely kids.